Who said that we could call her Elle sent us an email to tell us her creepy story, and she said, I don't really know who or like what I met, but not a fan. And when you hear the story, you'll understand why. So Elle said that this happened a few years ago. It was like right after CVID. So she was kind of in a place where she just wanted to get back out there into the world, and she wanted to make new friends, form connections, all that good stuff. Since she does want to be anonymous, she did give me the backstory on this, but I'm going to be vague because I don't want any identifying information to be out there. But basically, a loose acquaintance of hers and her kind of connected. They had never connected before. They knew of each other, but they were not close friends. They didn't run in the same friend groups. This person even actually lived like hours away from her, about 2.5. They knew each other loosely and then just kind of reconnected on social media. Elle said that she was a mom, this girl was a mom, and she just thought, hey, maybe like we could actually have a friendship from this. So this girl, who Elle said that we can just call T, so T, this is the girl she was making friends with. T texted her, called her, I'm not sure, and said, hey, I'm having a birthday party for my fiance up where I live, 2 hours from where you live, and I would really love if you and your husband could come, but it's not really going to be a kid-friendly event, so I would not bring your kids because I'm not going to bring mine. When T said this, Elle told me that she just kind of thought, okay, it's going to be like drinking and it's going to be loud and they just don't want kids around. Get it? Some people are like that. That's fine. So Elle talks to her husband. They decide, you know what? Yeah, let's get out of the house. Like, we're going to go. We're going to drive up there for this party. We'll just drive home that night because neither of them drink. So she was like, yeah, it'll be fine. The kids can stay with grandparents and let's just go have fun. So T gives Elle the address, plugs it into her GPS, starts on her way. Now, when T gave Elle the address, she told her like, hey, like, it's not like my house. It's kind of like just like where we hold events. So that's where we're going to be. So Elle's like, okay, cool. Her and her husband pull up, and she says when she pulls up, this is not like an event place or like an event hall. It's the middle of nowhere, you guys. She said it's in the middle of a field, and it looks like a literal just shack, just a shack. And she's thinking, okay, that's totally fine. Maybe they're outdoorsy. Maybe that's why we're here. Now, the only people that her and her husband know at this party, loosely, acquaintance-wise, are T and T's fiance. So her and her husband, they get out of the car and they're kind of looking around for them, but they're not seeing them. So Elle's husband ends up talking to someone who walks up to them, and it's a woman. And he's like, hey, how are you? And introduces himself. And immediately she says that like the vibe shifts, and this lady's, I guess, husband walks over and immediately starts getting in her husband's face and is like, oh, so you're going to walk up here and you're going to say hello to my wife, but you're not going to speak to me like a man? That's weird. Like, apparently the girl had just walked up to him, and Elle said she was standing there and she was just like, I'm just gonna diffuse the situation, like, hey, like, I'm his wife, like, everything is fine. But the vibes were just off. But Elle told me that her husband is not an aggressive person. He's not a fighter, he's a lover, and he just diffused the situation and just was kind of like, okay, let's just give this a second chance. They walk a little further into this gathering, which they thought was going to be like a big birthday party. Well, it turns out there's only about 8 people there, including them. So they do end up finding T and her fiance, and they're, you know, hey, great, everything is fine. 8 people total. It's just a laid back evening. A couple of hours, Elle says that everything feels normal. Like, there's nothing weird. Like, there was that one vibe thing when they first got there, but everything had kind of calmed down. And at this point, they had been there for a few hours, and they're kind of waiting for like the craziness to start because they didn't want kids there. There were no kids present, but Elle noticed that no one was drinking. There was nothing illicit going on. They were truly just sitting around and talking. They were outside. It was dark. They had a little bit of a fire going. So then T says, hey, all right, everybody, like, let's go inside. Like, there's some food and like we have like birthday stuff because it's her fiance's birthday. Elle and her husband follow everyone inside. When they go in, yes, it does have light. So it's like this well-lit one big room with like a little bit of a kitchenette off to the side, like inside this little shack that they were in. But it is well lit. And Elle says that she starts kind of like looking around at everyone who is in this room. And she's finally getting like a good look at everyone who's there. And she says that what she notices is that there is something wrong with their eyes. So her and her husband, perfectly fine. She looks at her husband, his eyes are normal. And she actually asks him like, are my eyes okay? And he tells her, yeah, your eyes are fine. But the other 6 people who are in there, she looks at them and she says that there is no color in these eyes. It's just the whites of the eyes and then just complete black. She says she's looking around the room, looking at all their eyes. Everyone is getting eerily quiet, almost like an awkward silence. And T's fiance looks at her and his eyes are completely black, and she kind of goes wide-eyed, and then she feels like in that moment he realized that she had seen and noticed his eyes, and she said that he smiled at her and blinked and opened his eyes and they were normal again. She said that he had bright blue eyes, so there was no more black irises. Elle told me that when she first saw their eyes, she was rationalizing it in her mind. She was like, okay, we have definitely got like some rug stuff going on right now. Then she said when he blinked and his eyes went back to normal, she thought, okay, I'm going into psychosis. After she saw this, she said she looked at her husband and she's like, hey, like, I think we need to get out of here. So she goes up to T and she tells her like, hey, we're gonna head out. And she said that T, whose eyes are completely normal now, just looks at her and she's like, oh, don't leave yet. Like, we've just got like one more thing that we're gonna do. Elle said she's a very nice person. Like, she's very accommodating, and she was like, okay, fine. Like, we'll stay for like a few more minutes, but we really got to get back. Like, we got to get our kids. Like, we got to go. So Elle's husband actually goes and starts making his rounds to say goodbye to everyone. And Elle just kind of decides like, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity to say goodbye to T so that when whatever's happening next is over, like, we can just go. So she walks up to T, they're alone, and they're just kind of standing there talking. She says, hey, like, you know what? Thanks for inviting me. It's getting late. I think I'm really tired. So we're just going to head on back and I'll, catch you on the next one. She said that T seemed perfectly normal, and then she leaned in close like she was going to give her a hug or say goodbye, but she doesn't actually reach out to hug her. She just gets like close to her ear and says, do you enjoy violence? Enjoy what? But Elle says that she just kind of pulls away from T, and she's like, what? And when she looks at T, she says that once again, her eyes are completely black. There is no color, just whites of her eyes and black irises. She said that T is just standing there staring at her complete black eyes and kind of glances at Elle's husband and then looks back at her and was like, has he ever hit you? And Elle was like, no, that's not normal. And she said that T was like, never? Like, just really wanted to pull it out of her. And she was like, no, that has never happened. She said that T just went, okay. And like looked down like this, looked back up, eyes completely normal again. At this point, Elle is like, okay, I am definitely slipping into psychosis. Get in the car. We're leaving, like, right now. As they're walking out, she's looking at everyone. She's glancing around the room, and she actually ends up looking at T's fiance. And she says, have you ever seen that clip of Ted Bundy where he's in the courtroom and the facade slips and you just see like a completely different person come out of him, like onto his face? She said that she glanced at T's fiance, and within a split second, it was like his face just completely changed and his eyes were completely black. She didn't talk to anybody else. She grabs her stuff. They got in their car. They hightailed it out of there. Like, they were gone. Elle said that her and her husband drove in complete silence for about 15 minutes. They were both just kind of reeling. Neither of them had talked about exactly what the other had seen up until that point. And she said that her husband said, did you see their eyes? And Elle was like, yes, I did. And she said it made her feel like she wasn't crazy. And then she asked him, like, well, what did you see? And he said they just had no color. Like, they would switch back and forth. Sometimes they would be solid black. Sometimes there would be color. And she said that they just kind of rode along trying to decide if there was any sort of a stimulant that could cause this or any sort of a drug that could cause this. But they are not familiar with those types of things. And they were like, well, if it was that, how would they switch like back and forth? We were watching them the entire time. I don't know when they would, like, they couldn't sneak away to do something and then come back and then their eyes change and then sneak away and then it'd be normal again. So Elle and her husband have no idea what they experienced that night or who or what they were around. But she did say that her and T have not spoken since. T has tried to reach out to her, but she's just like, no, girl, like, that was too weird for me. I don't know. What do you think? Who do you think that they were? Was it just like a stimulant thing? I don't know. But do you enjoy? That's a weird question to ask somebody when you don't really, like, that's weird. Anyway, Elle, thank you so much for your story, and everyone who is still here, thank you for bearing with me. Depression is a weird thing, and sometimes you just got to pull yourself out of it, and you kind of got to get a little bit of help. So I just wasn't in the best place, but I am feeling much better now. So thank you for being here, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful day.
Have you ever heard of someone accidentally conjuring spirits? Yeah, I know you haven't. So come on, grab a drink and come watch the story time. Okay, so for this story time, we're gonna call him King. Now, King is now 15. However, when all of this took place, he was only 10. King used to always want superpowers growing up, specifically telekinesis. So he used to get on YouTube, search up spells, and copy whatever they was doing. One particular day, King and his aunt Mimi, who was also at this time around the same age as him, they get on YouTube and search up this spell that's supposed to give them some type of mind powers to read people's mind. The video they watched told them to get a clean, never before used needle to draw blood from themselves and then use that to write whatever power they wanted and then wipe it. Now, both of them did just that. King said after they did it, they was disappointed because nothing happened. Now, a couple days go by and King just gets sick out of nowhere. I'm talking about he's losing weight fast, he's throwing up blood, he can't keep anything down, and he doesn't know what's going on. It got so bad, King had to go to the hospital. Now, while he's in a hospital, he's having dreams of him looking at himself and also having dreams replaying Mimi doing the spell. Just to give y'all some context, King said that he lived in a small apartment at the time. So when you first walked in the house, it was the living room. Right across from the living room was the kitchen. If you walked out the kitchen, you was back into the living room. If you're in the living room and you look to the left, you're going to see 3 bedrooms. But straight down the hall was King's room. To the right side was his parents' room and a spare room. King said there's a picture of Mother Mary in the living room that faces towards his room. He said when he looked at the picture, there was a cloaked person standing in the picture. The person was completely covered from head to toe. Only thing that was showing was their arms, and their arms was so pale and white. He said down to the nails, they was ripped off and red that he was so terrified he ended up waking up out of his sleep. He woke up crying in the hospital, realizing he's alone because his parents had to go to work. He said the next day he felt better, he wasn't throwing up blood anymore, so he felt like this was going to be a normal day. He was able to go home and get released from the hospital. Now, remember the cloak that he saw in his dream? When he got home, he saw it standing there again that night. Actually, every night. He was so terrified, he never told his parents because he felt like his parents wouldn't believe him. Now, things started to progress and get worse. He eventually started hearing voices inside the house, and he also started seeing a man walk into their spare room, sit on the floor, and just cry. Even with all of these things happening to King, he still kept it to himself. Days go on, his siblings end up having a basketball game, which his parents attended. King said he did not want to attend, so he stayed home. King ended up sitting in the living room because he was just too terrified to sit in his own room. Now, as he was doing homework, the light fixture in the kitchen busted. He said it was glass everywhere, that he was so scared at this age, he literally peed himself. He said he ran into his parents' room, got up under the covers, and was just scared. But he forgot to close the door. He said as he hid under the sheets, all he could hear was footsteps getting closer to him and a man guttering. He said it sounded old and jagged, more like as if he was a smoker. King hear these footsteps leading up to him. They stopped right at his parents' door. King could do at this point was just cry, and just continue shaking because he was so scared. He said then the footsteps continued over to where he was at. The blanket was snatched off from his body, and all he could do was just cry and scream for his parents. King then ran out of the house, ran to his neighbor's house to call his parents. At that moment, he then broke down to his parents everything that had been going on. His mom rushed home while his dad stayed at the basketball game with his siblings. They walked into the house. King ended up showing her where in the kitchen the light bulb had busted and shattered. Now, 2 days later, his grandmother ended up coming over with some holy oil and praying over the house. He said after that, he never saw that figure again, nor did he see the man that was hiding in their spare room crying on the floor. He said it wasn't until recently that his mother told him she's now having paranormal experiences. Said, for example, one time his mother was in the kitchen washing dishes and she saw and felt someone standing behind her, playing in her hair. She said when she immediately turned around, no one was there. Said another experience happened when him and his mom was in her room watching a horror movie, and all of a sudden a picture fell off the wall. His dad ended up saying one night while everyone was asleep and he went into the hallway, he saw a little girl standing in the hallway in front of King's and his siblings' room. He said, to make a long story short, he never touched another spell or YouTube another spell ever again. All right, y'all. So leave your comments and thoughts below. If you guys have a story that you want to submit, make sure you email it to the email that's in my bio, or you can DM it to me. Until the next story, enjoy this one.
I heard this story in Spanish, I want to say like 7 years ago. And ever since then, it's always been in my mind. I've always wanted to translate this for you guys because the story itself is so crazy. This is called Exorcismo en Tijuana, and I first heard this by Relatos de la Noche. So if you know Spanish, please go listen to the story from them because obviously it's like 10 times scarier. Just a fair warning, this video may be an hour long. So sit back, grab a snack, and get your blankets and put it over your feet because this shit is scary. For my non-Spanish speakers, this story is called Exorcism in Tijuana. So there is many point of views to this story, but the one that we're going to be listening to is from the point of view of the doctor that was involved. So it actually starts off with a letter that this doctor is writing to his brother. And the reason why he wrote it is because he just really needed to tell somebody. He really needed to get it out. He felt like he couldn't believe it himself, even though he was there to witness everything. Just a heads up, there are also things that we don't know about this story because some of these people decided to keep it secret. I don't know how people got this information, probably finding the letters from the brother, but yeah, we're not supposed to even know about some of this story, so just get ready for it. Some of the names in this story are also changed just due to privacy reasons for the people involved. So the letter starts off with, Manuel, I'm writing to you because right now you're the only person that I can confide in with this information. You of all people know me, you know that even when I was little, I didn't really care much for paranormal or the scary stories that our family loved to listen to. Because of this, I need you to remember that. I need you to remember that I wouldn't make up anything. I need you to remember that what I'm about to tell you is real and it's true and I witnessed this. I need you to believe in me because I'm having a really hard time at the moment believing in myself even. I also want to ask that you don't share this story with anyone. He starts to explain that about a week ago, he got a phone call from his friend Rogelio that he had when he was in school and that he should remember him because he would come to the house very often. Rogelio is now a radio host in which they talk about supernatural, urban legends, and things of that sort. Rogelio actually contacted him, the doctor, and asked him for a favor and said that he needed to not tell anybody about this. Long story short, that same night that Rogelio had contacted him, he ended up going to his house. When he gets there, he sees that there is a priest, his other co-host, and even his assistant. So they all have a seat and his friend Rogelio is starting to tell him why he invited him over. Rogelio starts explaining that for the past few days they've been receiving calls to their show by a mother named Carmen. The mom Carmen is asking for help because she believes that her daughter Carolina is possessed by the devil. Neither of the show hosts believed her, but they thought to themselves, hey, this might be a good story, maybe we'll get more listeners, so let's just let her go ahead and talk. The host honestly thought that it was just like another person who confused maybe mental health issues with somebody being possessed, so they just decided to listen to the lady. They honestly thought that was the end of it. They weren't going to hear about this lady or her daughter again, but for the next 7 days, this mom continued to call this radio show time after time. The more and more that they talked to this lady, they also got to hear the daughter's voice, and it started to become very strange because when they would talk to the daughter, her voice would change like if it was a completely different person, and then she would start to talk in different languages that they couldn't understand. As you can imagine, the radio hosts were very excited about this because this lady alone was bringing in a lot of listeners for them, so obviously they were entertaining her. They also believed that the mom was messing with them. They believed that she was getting like voice changes, but they didn't really care because they were getting the listeners that they wanted until the Friday of that week came, that is. It was Friday, it was around 11 p.m. and just like the days before, they received a phone call from the mom, Carmen. This time when they answered the phone, it wasn't the mom asking for help for her daughter. This time, it was the daughter, Carolina. In a very calm voice, Carolina tells the host that they're no longer going to be talking to her mom. Both of the radio hosts, even the assistant that was on standby, started to look at each other and they felt very guilty because they were thinking, shit, we were entertaining entertaining this, but what if Carolina did have a very severe mental health issue? And what if something happened to the mom? Like, they were thinking all of this in the moment when they heard Carolina talking on the phone. They didn't have a lot of time to think about that guilt because out of nowhere, the lights in the studio just shut off, and the last thing that they heard from their headphones were some weird staticky noises. Like, it was so loud they had to take them off. For a few minutes, they all stayed very frozen. They even claimed that the studio just felt very, very cold. When the lights finally came back after a few minutes, they look at their controls and there are so many calls coming into their show. All of the people that were calling in were claiming that when the show went off air, all they heard on their end of the radio were really evil laughs, and in the background just some woman screaming like crazy. The people were claiming that the evil laughing and the screams went on for about at least a minute. A lot of the people that were calling in were really scared, but other people were actually mad at the host because they're thinking that this is a prank and that they're just doing this to get more listeners, and obviously it wasn't a prank. Because of this, the radio host ends up telling their audience, hey, we did not plan this. This isn't a prank on our part, but we are asking that let's all have a moment just to pray. If you guys can just, stay silent for a moment, let's all pray about this because sincerely, this isn't a prank. We did not plan this. They did go on with the show that night, but they made it a point not to talk about Carmen or Carolina or anything of that situation. The following morning, the show host and the assistant got together, and not only did they get together to talk about what topics they're going to be on the show that night, but they wanted to call that lady Carmen to see if she was okay. When Carmen actually answered the phone, everybody just, breathed a little easier. They ended up asking the lady Carmen for her address because they were going to take her case very seriously and see how they can help her, and the lady was really appreciative. Just as a side note, this show had dealt with things like this. They have helped some of their audience before, which is why they do have priests that would usually go with them. When they got to the lady's house, they started to apologize to her that they weren't taking her seriously every time she would call day after day, and about the phone call the night before and how crazy that was, and they were really worried. And Carmen just started crying out of nowhere. Carmen explained to them that she has not been calling the show day after day. The only time that she called the show was the first night that she talked to them. I have fucking chills. The daughter was calling, but it was the mom's voice day after day after. Out of nowhere, a scream just interrupted their conversation, and it was coming from upstairs in Carolina's bedroom. So again, the doctor is writing this letter to his brother, and he's like, what these show hosts described to me that they saw in Carolina's room made me think that they were on drugs. Because up until that point, they were still just explaining what is going on to him. He still wasn't involved yet, so he didn't know what to make of all this. The doctor, who again is writing this letter to his brother, he in the letter is like, I need you to keep reading. I need you to believe in me. This is just the beginning. We have not even gotten started to the part where it gets crazy. After what they saw in Carolina's room, the mom went running to get this pastor that lived near the house, and the show host actually left and called a priest that they knew in Tijuana. By the time they all went back to Doña Carmen's house and gathered with the priest, with the pastor, the mom, Carmen, was crying hysterically. They noticed that the mom's dress was full of red stuff. It almost looked like blood, and that the pastor that had been staying with her for the moment was covering his nose with a napkin, and he was also filled with red stuff. His assistant had also stayed there with them while he went to Tijuana and get this priest, and he said that his assistant was literally sitting by the door sweating so much, almost like if he was holding the girl in. The father, Carlos, that he had gotten from Tijuana ended up walking into the girl's bedroom, and everything seemed very silent, very still. After spending 5 minutes inside the girl, After spending 5 minutes inside the bedroom with the girl Carolina, the priest comes back out and tells him he needs to go back to Tijuana, and that's where they took him, and they were waiting for him, and they noticed that he just kept making phone call after phone call. While this was all happening, they ended up going back home because it was going to take the father a little longer to do whatever he had to do. The radio host actually decided not to do the show that weekend, and they wanted to focus on this case. They ended up getting a phone call by Father Carlos saying that it was approved for him to take care of this girl, but they needed to transfer the girl to where he was. Father Carlos actually sent 2 of his workers, and then the 2 show hosts and the assistant ended up going to the lady Carmen's house. When they got there, Carmen was already outside, almost like if she was waiting for them, and when they got off, she started to tell them that Carolina had been screaming all day, but that her voice sounded like a male voice. She also claimed to have seen Carolina floating above her bed in her bedroom. When the men walked in the living room, it almost looked like a tornado had hid it, and when they all walked into Carolina's room, she was sitting at the edge of her bed just smiling. She turned to look at them and say, "Okay, I'm ready to go with you." They were obviously very cautious. They were scared that she was going to attack them, but surprisingly, Carolina was very calm the entire ride, and they ended up getting to the church. It was only when they got to the church for Father Carlos that Carolina just started laughing. Then she would just start talking to herself like in a low whisper where only she could hear. Almost like if she was talking to somebody in secret, and then she would go back to laughing, almost like a child that was doing something wrong. So we're back to the doctor writing the letter, and he starts to explain that as he's listening to the story, he's starting to believe more and more of what the show host is telling him. And he's also a little confused because he's like, well, if all of this is happening, like, what do you need me for? That is when Rogelio, the show host, explains to him that they took her to Father Carlos just the day before, and that Father Carlos has been with her all day yesterday, but that they need a specialist. They need somebody who can see her medically. And he explains that he stupidly agreed and even told them that he wanted to see her that same night. They all agreed that he could meet her that night. Unfortunately, the show host and the assistant, they had to go do a show, but that Father Carlos was going to go with him to meet the girl. So he gets in the car with Father Carlos, and they're on the way to the church, but he explains that he started to see shadows on the road. Like every time there was a stop, he could swear that somebody was standing next to his window, and that the streets were just like eerily deserted. He didn't express this to Father Carlos, but he said that at one moment, Father Carlos looked at him and said, "I could feel it too. I know what you're going through, and I could see it as well." He says that Father Carlos just tells him, "God is with us, and that's all you have to think about." This is where he says that he starts to feel very serious, because in that moment he was looking at Father Carlos, and he's like, if someone with immense amount of faith, someone who is close to God, is looking at you with fear in his eyes, you know you're about to confront something very, very serious. They parked the car like a block away from the church, and that Father Carlos was trying to make conversation with him, but he just couldn't talk to him. He was so distracted. He claims that as they're walking towards the church, he could feel someone just breathing down his neck. He finally paid attention to what Father Carlos was saying, and he realized that he wasn't conversing with him. He was actually praying as they're walking to the church. He also noticed that Father Carlos was not looking at him anymore. He was looking forward. So he followed where he was looking at, and he sees that there was a lamp above, but when he looked down, there was a silhouette of a woman standing beneath the light. Then he comes back to the letter he's sending his brother, and he's like, "I don't know how many times I have to ask you to please believe what I'm telling you, but please stay with me. Keep reading. I'm not making this up. I promise you that this is real on my daughter's life." In that moment where he sees the silhouette of the woman, and he sees that Father Carlos is very seriously praying, he was about to ask him like, what's wrong? And this loud scream just interrupted everything. That's when Father Carlos is still looking at this woman ahead of them, and he says, "Carolina, is that you?" And there was no response. That's when the woman that they were seeing actually walks across from the church, and then she gets lost in the darkness of the street. They finally make it to the door of the church, and when they knock, it took them a while to open the door, but when they did, he explains that there was just a lot of movement, like there's so many people in there. There were a lot of older ladies and what he thought were volunteers. There were also a lot of nuns inside there. Father Carlos went up to a nun, and I guess they had a conversation. He came back and said that the person in charge of Carolina is not there at the moment, that he went to go get something done, but that he could go ahead and meet her, but he tells them be very careful. He also tells them, do not go in there by yourself. Do not go in there alone. I wouldn't even want to go in there alone. He explains how it seemed that people have been there like all day and night because there was food, there was coffee, like people were there in support of what was happening. And he started walking around and asked the lady if she knew where Carolina was being held in, and she pointed to this very old wooden door. She had to unlock the door for him, and when they did it, he could tell that it was like a hallway with a whole bunch of rooms in there, and that this older lady tells him, knock on the door when you want to come back out. So he was about to be locked in there with Carolina. He knew that he had to do it. He knew that he couldn't go back out anymore, but he also told himself, like, the devil doesn't exist. Like, you know better. You know, you've heard the stories. You don't believe in that. So go ahead and help that girl. So as he starts walking down the hallway, he says that he can hear a girl singing. So he started following the voice of this girl singing, and as he got to the door where he heard it, he said that he was about to open the door, and obviously fully expecting to see this girl singing. But as he opened the door, it it almost felt like this song turned into like the sound of a wind. There was no girl, like no one was singing. There was no way that any sort of wind would be going through this space because there was only like the tiniest windows in these rooms because they were used to hold people in and not have them escape. As he entered the bedroom, it was completely dark in there and he was waiting for his eyes to adjust, and when they adjusted is when he finally saw her. He saw her standing in one of the corners of the room facing the wall, almost like if she was a mannequin. Then he hears a sound coming from the opposite end of the room and he realizes that she is not alone in that bedroom. He turns to look at that other end of the room and he sees another silhouette which shouldn't be there because the girl is in there by herself. Everything in him wants him to turn around, go running down the hallway and knock on the door to get out of there. He knew that he was already in there. He knew that he just needed to follow through. So what he did is just walk right into that room and was started to walk towards Carolina. He wanted to meet her. He wanted to see what was actually wrong with her. He wanted to disprove the fact that she was possessed by the devil. When he finally gets to Carolina, he realizes that she's no longer facing the wall. She is facing him with a big smile on her face and her hand extended out like greeting him. He explains that something was not okay with her eyes because they were all completely in white, or at least that's what he sees in the darkness. Carolina wouldn't stop smiling and trying to reach for his hand, but then he starts to notice that she is giving him a sign, like trying to give him a sign with her hand to look behind you. Oh my god, I just got chills. Smiling from ear to ear and still having these white eyes, she is pointing behind him, but behind him is the hallway, so she wants him to look towards the hallway. When he looks down the hallway in front of that locked door that he has to knock to get out, he ends up seeing the silhouette, the same silhouette that he had seen in the bedroom with her when he first walked in there. That silhouette now started walking towards the doctor slowly, little by little, and at the moment he is literally paralyzed in fear. He was trying to rationalize this, but he couldn't. In that moment, the door that was locked opened up and it was Father Carlos with two other guys. That silhouette that was walking closer and closer to him walked into one of those bedrooms that was in the hallway. Father Carlos saw that the doctor was really pale, he was frozen, and immediately starts apologizing to him, telling him that she should have gone in there with him. Father Carlos tells him that he didn't want to tell him anything before he met her because a lot of people have been claiming that there was other silhouettes or like shadows in there with her, so he didn't want to scare him, but he also wanted him to experience her by himself. Two things were very clear to the doctor. People were also seeing the same silhouette that he has, and that the silhouette that him and the father had seen outside under that light post was definitely Carolina. So by the time morning came, they actually got a phone call by Rogelio, the show host, and he was saying that he wasn't going to talk about Carmen or Carolina, and a lot of people that night before were calling in because they wanted updates on the situation. They knew it was the right thing to do, and even during that time when all of this was happening, they stopped taking calls altogether. During that call, they were also told that two priests would be visiting Carolina in a week so that they could try to help her because they were specialists on what was going on. So basically they were approved for an exorcism. One of the priests was from Philadelphia and the other priest was coming from Chile. Basically all they had to do was wait. They just had to wait for those two priests to get there and hopefully they can help Carolina. The priest that was coming from Philadelphia actually got there a little earlier, but he insisted on talking to the two show hosts because he just wanted to make sure this wasn't a prank or a game or something that they were making up for fun. The show host also asked the doctor, the one writing the letter, to meet with them as well. So they all ended up going to like this house that they had set up for the priest that was coming from Philadelphia, and they were all gonna have this meeting. He explains that the meeting didn't go the way he thought it was gonna go. The priest actually seemed very open to everything that they had to say. They explained to him from beginning to end everything that had been happening, and he was open to what they were saying. After about an hour of talking about this nonstop, the radio host Rogelio actually paused and asked the priest if he actually believed what they were saying because they did need him to take it seriously. The priest was actually very honest with him. He said that when he first heard about this, he just thought it was going to be this like prank show about these radio hosts and he was basically wasting his time. But that the first thing he did when he got to Tijuana was meet Carolina, and it wasn't even 5 minutes into meeting her where he realized that this was very serious and very real. Okay, I think I fucked up because this wasn't like the Exorcist people. Basically, this priest from Philadelphia said that he saw the severity of the situation and had already made a call to the Vatican. And that's when everybody looked at him like, fuck, like this shit is getting real. The priest starts talking to all of them and he's like, you know, there's no coincidences in this kind of case. She presented to you for a reason. She made you get involved in this for a reason. And I suggest that you guys stop doing the show at least until we resolve this thing. Which is so true, because like, why would she call in pretending to be her mom? Why would she do all this saying, hey, my mom, you're not gonna talk to my mom anymore? Like, what is the reason behind all of this? She literally involved them. Now I'm like questioning myself, why? Actually, I don't want to know why. I'm so scared. They all looked at each other very seriously, but they knew that they couldn't stop doing the show. Like, they all had shows in the morning as well, but the show at night, this has become the biggest projects of their career, so they couldn't just stop doing it for like this long period of time. Asking them to stop the show is basically like asking them to stop having a job. Like, they couldn't do it. They also hadn't been on air for like a very long time where they could at least replay old episodes, so they couldn't even do that. The priest understood, but he asked if they could maybe stay close to the church while everything was happening, just in case anything else happened. He also warned them that if needed, they were gonna have to be in the room with Carolina while this process was happening. I would have run away, bitch. By this time, it was Friday and the guys had to do the show, and this time they did open up the phone lines again like normal. Because of everything that was happening, they didn't have time to prepare any like stories to tell, so they were gonna need people to call in and share their stories for their radio show. Before they started taking calls, of course, in the radio show, they told everybody, hey guys, do not call asking about Carmen or Carolina. When we have an update, we'll let you guys know. So if you are calling, please don't let it be about them and let it be about your stories. They basically warned them that if they asked about them, they would be disconnecting the phone call. Towards the end of the show, some lady's phone call caught their attention because she had sworn to see like this woman with a white gown walking around her house at night. She claimed that this lady would look into their windows and things like that, and they thought that it would be a really interesting story, so they went ahead and pushed her call through. That's when they started to pay attention to the details that this lady was telling them. The woman that the lady was describing looked exactly how Carolina was dressed that day that they went to pick her up. Even worse, when they asked the lady like where she was located, this lady gave an address that was very close to the church where Carolina was. The weirdest thing though was that the woman was saying that this silhouette, this thing that she would see, she had always seen ever since she was little. That call accidentally dropped, so they still had time to take another story, and there was another caller on the line. When that last call was pushed through, both of the hosts were very quiet, very silent, because they realized that the voice was of Carolina. Before either of them knew what to even say, because obviously it's Carolina's voice, she then tells them, I will be seeing both of you very soon. So Rogelio's co-host Lino was the one who responded to her and said, yes, we will be seeing you very soon during the process that's happening right now. That's when Carolina responded to him and said, no, you'll be seeing me before. Oh my god. As soon as she said that, the lights started flickering, and that's when Rogelio just disconnected the call. They still had a few minutes left on the show, but Lino was looking at Rogelio like, we're ending the show right now, and that is what he did. Both of the hosts left that cabin. They ran into the assistant. There was also another lady that worked at the radio station, and they were all terrified from that call. They ended up getting a phone call by like the higher-ups asking why they stopped the show before they should have, and they just lied and said that they were having technical difficulties. But that's when the higher-ups tell them that like the whole show got disconnected when they got Carolina's phone call. So basically the last thing that they heard was them saying that, oh, this call from the prior lady got disconnected, let's pick up another call, and then the show ended. So it was much longer than that, you know, those minutes that they were claiming. So to them, they had been off air for a lot longer than they thought they had. They're very curious about this, so they went back to listen to what was aired just to see, and they were right. As soon as they got the call from Carolina, it went static and nothing was heard to anybody. After this, they all went home, but at different points of them, you know, on their way home, they all claimed to see this silhouette of a woman who was basically just watching them. By this point, they started doing the exorcism on Carolina, and they start to explain like, you have no idea the process of an exorcism. If you watch a scary movie, it is nothing like that. It is such a long process, and the way the priests have to be there the entire time, and it's just tiring, it's intense, it's crazy. He explains how these priests are literally like tag teaming each other in. The entire time they're trying to expel expel this out of her, and when they get tired, another one comes in. It's like a never-ending process. The doctor explains that even he has slept in the hallway while they're doing this exorcism on her, and it's just a vigorous process. Again, he's writing the letter to his brother, and he's like, you're not gonna believe what I saw when they first called me in there. He explains that he walked in there and he sees Carolina levitating in mid-air. He explains how she was just there levitating above the bed, and it's like he couldn't believe what he was seeing, so he knows that his brother's gonna have a hard time believing that, but he swears this is what happened. He also remembers one time where this really young nun came crying and screaming out of Carolina's room. The doctor was saying that he was there for most of it because Carolina was really weak at that point. She hadn't eaten anything, she hadn't drank anything, so he had to be there for a majority of the moments. He also couldn't even understand how such a fragile body could put up with like these things that she was going through. He also mentions that he is worried about the sounds that are happening in his home currently as he's writing the letter to his brother. Mind you, everything had already happened. So as he's writing this, describing everything that's happening, he's starting to hear sounds inside of his house. Out of nowhere, the doctor, Rogelio, Lino, the show host, they all started getting really sick. It almost seemed like they had some kind of flu. They were so sick that they couldn't even get out of bed without feeling dizzy or nauseous. They started to see that even the priests were starting to look weak. Even the mom, Carmen, was looking very sick. By this point, it had been a month. It had been a whole month from like the beginning all the way to where they were now, and Rogelio actually got a call from the higher up saying that his show was actually going to be off the air. They were never able to recover from this. They basically lost their jobs, but they were also very scared to even talk about this again. Even before the show was basically cut, they stopped taking calls in. Like they started talking about more of like duendes or like mystical creatures, but nothing of like possession or things that were happening to people. A few days after everything basically ended, they decided to go back to the church because they wanted to support Carmen, the mom, which by the way, she had been by Carolina's side the entire time. She refused to give up on her daughter. By this point, it was Rogelio, Lino, the co-host, the assistant, Father Carlos, the doctor, and they had already gotten another doctor from the US to come and assist the doctor that's writing the letter. They all decided to meet for coffee down the street from the church. They all got there and it was already late at night, and you could tell that everybody's energy was like down. A lot of them were scared, and that's when Father Carlos started talking about how people were starting to talk about what was happening inside of the church. Rogelio asked the priest if that has attracted a lot of weirdos to go to the church, and the father was basically like, no, quite the opposite. People have started to get scared to go to church. People stopped going to the misas, and even some people were claiming to hear screams coming from inside the church. Some people were claiming to see shadows inside of the church. So people were definitely getting scared of going. People started claiming to see like the statues inside of the church move, and that some of them were even getting dirtier than they've ever were, and they just can't explain why. In all honesty, he said that they couldn't see a light at the end of this tunnel for Carolina, so a lot of them started giving up and stopped showing up. By this point, they had all gone back to the church, and he said that there were actually more people than normal. There was a lot of volunteers, nuns, and the doctor had already made like his own room in that hallway where the doors locked and where Carolina was. He basically took over one of the rooms because he was there so much. And he says that there was no progress. Like they had been doing this exorcism for time and time again, and Carolina was not showing any progress. So there was one day where the doctor was laying in that room in the bed where he had made into his own room, and he was just laying there waiting for somebody to call him, where he accidentally fell asleep and he got jolted awake by the sound of someone screaming. He also heard where somebody ran by his door, which he had the door open, so he clearly heard when somebody ran by. He got up immediately. He looks towards the hallway. He still sees that door is locked, but he doesn't see anybody else in the rooms. He walks to the end of the hall to where Carolina's room is to see what was going on, what was happening, and he realizes that her door is open, and that door was also kept locked because of what was happening. So he runs to the door to close it, and when he looks in through the the window of the door, he sees that there's actually nobody in there. He opens the door again because he wants to make sure nobody's in there, and no one is there. He said that the only thing that he smells is like something rancid, like something wet in that room, but there's nobody in there. Carolina is not in there. He slowly walks out of Carolina's room, looks back to the hallway, and that front door is still locked, which means that Carolina couldn't have gotten out, and that means that she has to be in one of the other bedrooms. He immediately runs to that door that's locked and starts banging on it for them to open the door because he wants to tell them that Carolina got out. He says that he heard an older woman's voice. It could have been like a nun or a volunteer, and that woman was asking him, "Where is Carolina?" The doctor says, "I don't know where she's at. Please let me out of here." The older woman tells him that she's not going to open the door until she's reassured that Carolina is at least in one of the bedrooms locked in. The doctor turns around, looks at the hallway with all of those 8 doors, and realizes that he's going to have to reassure himself that Carolina is in one of those doors, and he was going to have to keep her in one of those rooms all by himself. He realizes that all of the doors from those rooms were the same as his door, the one where he was staying, in which none of them had any locks. The only one that had a lock was Carolina's room. He realized that not only was he gonna have to figure out where Carolina was, but there was no way of him locking her in a random room. He was gonna have to get her, put her back into her room, and then lock it. Before he even started looking, he told that old lady through the door if she can please go get Father Carlos or anybody else to come and help him. But the lady told him no, that she couldn't abandon the door. The doctor had no choice. He had to look room by room, so that is what he did. When he opened up the first few doors, he turned the lights on, and there was nobody in there. He was also having to look under the bed for her. That scary movie moment. No fucking thank you. What the hell? He went through the 4th door, the 5th door, the 6th door, until he only had one more room to look into. And it just so happened to be the bedroom that was right across from where Carolina's room was, where he could lock the door. She was in there. She had to be in there because she wasn't in any of the other bedrooms. He got the door handle. He twisted it very slowly, but when he opened up the door just like a little bit, he didn't hear anybody in there. He knew what he had to do. He had to very quickly open the door, turn on the lights, see where she was, make sure she was in there, and then close the door again, because that's what his plan was. Because he didn't know in what condition she was going to be in, or if he was going to be able to even get her from that room to the room where she should be in. He literally talked himself up. He knew this was going to be the scariest thing he had to do, like, in his whole life. And he opens the door, and there is nobody in there. It was all in perfect order, and it seemed like it was more of like an office than an actual bedroom, and nobody was in there. In that moment, as his back was facing Carolina's real room where she was locked in, is where he hears a strange sound of someone just breathing really loud. He walks towards Carolina's room, but he looks down the hallway and sees that that main door that has remained locked is now open. He obviously went running out of there, and when he left that door, he said that everything seemed very quiet, like there was nobody there. He felt like he was in a nightmare. He was literally running through hallways that were deserted. Nobody was around him. He started running towards the altar because he's starting to realize that he's hearing sounds coming from there of people screaming. He got there and realized that the door to the church was actually opened. He ran outside of the church and says that he walked into a scene that he will never forget. There was an old lady that was being attended to by these police officers in an ambulance. There was also other police cars just surrounding the church. None of them actually had like the sirens on. They were just like there, like if there something happened, but it wasn't like an emergency. On the other side, he could see that there was a priest and a nun running away from the church, and that's also when he saw Rogelio's assistant walking towards him. The assistant was like dripping in sweat, and obviously the doctor's like, what is happening? What is going on? Carolina had escaped at the same time that some of the priests were leaving that hallway. When they found her, she was standing by the altar in front of where like the priest gives his sermons, and she was laughing and dancing and basically making fun of the people that were there. She was even acting like if she was the priest, like if she was giving a sermon to people. When people saw that, they knew it was Carolina. They all started running. Some of them went to where the priests were, the exorcist priests, to get them because Carolina had gotten out. It was total chaos. Some of them lost vision of her, so they didn't know where she was until people outside of the church were screaming. They sounded scared, and they knew that she was outside of the church now. By this point, everybody left the church. The co-host of the radio show, the assistant, the priest, everybody had left because they were going to go look for her. The police officers that had gotten there were also called there to go look for Carolina as well. The doctor actually decided to go near that old lady that was with the police officers to see if she was okay, because apparently maybe someone hurt her while everybody was trying to run out of the church. And the lady said that she was doing better now, and he decided to ask her, was it you, the one outside the door, that wouldn't let me out? But the lady was like, no, there had been nobody in the church for a very long time. The only person that was inside of that church was the doctor. The old lady voice on the other side of the door was Carolina, who had just escaped, telling him to go and look door by door, make sure that he locks her in one of the It was Carolina's voice the entire time, pretending to be an older lady. Oh my god, I'm chill. The last thing they told the doctor was that Carolina ended up running through the streets, and she was just laughing, almost like if she was triumphant, like she managed to get away. And no one else saw her after that. He explains that for a very long time, he was very worried for Carolina because of the condition that she was in. He didn't think that she was gonna make it. Without any medical attention, she could possibly die. He feels very guilty because he felt like he failed them. He failed the girl that he could have saved. He failed the mom that even after everything happened, she would go and walk around the streets of that church asking if anybody has seen her daughter. She would walk around with a picture of her daughter, and at that point, people would just ignore her. Not only was the doctor feeling tormented because he couldn't help her, but he was very much aware that now Carolina was just free. Whatever was inside of Carolina was just free to do whatever it wanted. This is where the letter basically ends, and we learn that the doctor, he actually passed away. After everything that happened, he kind of drove himself into drinking. He ended up getting a divorce from his wife, and he didn't see his daughters because they moved away from him. The co-host, his friend Rogelio, the last thing that they knew about him was that he moved away from the city and that he was still doing radio shows, but now they were religious ones. Father Carlos also ended up moving away from there, and the other co-host still remained in that town doing different projects, and sometimes he would go around helping Carmen, the mom. The mom also ended up passing away, and she never found her daughter. However, the story, it hasn't ended completely. Street vendors and sellers that work around that church in Tijuana claim to see a lady in white at very late hours of the night. Mind you, these people probably don't even know the story behind Carolina, but they still claim to see her around that area. I swear this story traumatized me when I first heard it, and if you listen to it in Spanish, you know that it's even more fucked up. I started translating this story at 1 p.m. It is 5 p.m. I have been in my office for that long just to make this video. So please, if you like it, leave a comment, share it. If you don't like it, let me know so I can block you. I'm just kidding. But if you like these longer stories, maybe not this long, because goddamn, let me know, and maybe I'll make time to make these longer videos as well. But what do you guys think? Carolina, dude, the part that fucking always gives me goosebumps, I think it's because I imagine these stories in my head. It's always the part where Carolina was the one talking to him through the door with the old lady voice, and it wasn't an old lady, it was her the entire time. Fuck. Anyway, let me know what you guys think.
This girl emailed me and said that she was chased by something that looked like a demon in the Appalachian Mountains and ended up in the hospital because of it. So we're gonna call this person Jamie. Every summer, Jamie would go visit her grandmother in the Appalachian Mountains. So when Jamie was 13 years old, summer came around and she went to her grandmother's house like she always did. So she goes to the Appalachian Mountains, and as soon as she walks up to her grandmother's house, her grandmother is sitting on the porch, and her grandmother immediately tells her to go to her grandpa's house. Now, her grandmother and her grandfather were divorced, but they only lived about 500, 600 feet away from each other, so she was able to walk over to her grandfather's house. Her grandmother wanted her to bring a stack of papers to her grandfather's house. So she grabs the stack of papers from her grandmother and she goes to walk to her grandfather's house. As she's walking to her grandfather's house, she is kind of walking through the woods, and she said that at first it was okay, but then suddenly she started to get this feeling of dread. It was pretty heavy on her chest, and she felt like somebody was watching her. Now, she had walked to her grandfather's house before several times, and she didn't really like walking in these woods. They kind of freaked her out, and she would get this feeling of dread a lot, but she said that this was the worst feeling that she had ever gotten. But she decides that she's going to shrug it off, because she's like, I've had this feeling before. It's fine. I'm just going to get to my grandfather's house. It's not that far away, so she continues to walk. So she continues to walk. She gets a bit further, and suddenly she hears this horrifying, screeching scream. She said that it sounded a lot like a bobcat, but just a lot deeper. Like the tone was much lower. It didn't sound very natural, but in her head, she's thinking it's just a bobcat. So she just continues to walk. She said that continuing to walk after hearing the scream was one of the biggest mistakes that she has ever made, and she wishes to this day that she did not make that mistake. So she continues walking. She's about 500 feet away at this point when she hears her grandmother call her. She doesn't think that this is that weird because she is only about 500 feet away, like I said, and her grandmother could have easily caught up to her because she is a very slow walker, or was a very slow walker at this time, she said. So she hears her grandmother's voice, but the only thing that made her think twice about it is it sounded different. The voice again sounded lower. She also said that it didn't sound exactly like her grandmother's voice. It almost sounded like something else was trying to mimic her grandmother's voice and just got very close to it. But again, it was lower. It was deeper. So she's looking around the trees and she's like, what? Like, what do you need? She's thinking her grandmother's out in the woods acting weird. And she hears a branch snap behind her. So she quickly turns around because she's on high alert at this point and she doesn't see anything. She turns back around and she continues to walk. She's getting scared at this point because all these things are kind of not adding up. I mean, one thing would have been okay, but multiple things like this, it's getting to her at this point. So she's kind of walking a little bit faster when suddenly she feels something shove her and she falls on a rock. She said as soon as she hit the ground, she got this feeling of dread like she has never felt before in her entire life. And suddenly she cannot move. She can't move her body. So she's laying on the ground and she physically is paralyzed. She cannot move. So she's scanning the forest with her eyes at this point, trying to figure out what's going on when she hears laughter. And she said that this laughter did not sound like a person. Now, I emailed her back to ask her exactly what the laughter sounded like, and she didn't get back to me. So all I know is it did not sound human. So she tries to scan her eyes where that laughter is coming from, and she is petrified at this point because she's frozen. She cannot move. She's literally paralyzed on the ground in the Appalachian Mountains, and she's hearing all of this stuff when suddenly she sees something out of the corner of her eye. She said she saw something that was extremely tall, very thin. It had a smile so wide it almost seemed unreal to her. Like she didn't understand how something could smile that big. Its teeth were black, like pitch black, and super sharp and long. She said that they looked so sharp and long that it looked like if it closed its mouth, its teeth would go right through its gums. She's laying there on the ground, petrified, literally thinking she's not going to make it. She said she could not believe what she was seeing. She said the moment she thought this thing was going to attack her, she all of a sudden could move again. And she jumped up and she just starts running towards her grandfather's house. She said as soon as she thought that it was going to be the end for her, all of a sudden she could move and she just bolted out of there. She starts running towards her grandfather's house. As she's running towards her grandfather's house, she can hear this thing like galloping behind her. It is keeping pace with her. It is chasing her at this point. So she finally gets to a point where she sees her grandfather's house and the door is open, almost as if her grandfather knew she was going to arrive in such a way. She said she finally gets to the door. She slams it as hard as she can and she just starts crying. She's telling her grandfather what happened and she's hysterically crying. She's shaking. She is afraid that he isn't going to believe her, and all of a sudden they both just hear this shriek come from outside. She said it was the last scream that she has ever heard from this thing. She said after this that her grandfather drove her to her grandmother's house and that she stayed at her grandmother's house for a week and would not come out of her grandmother's house for an entire week. Her mom actually had to come get her early. She had to come drive to the Appalachian Mountains and come pick her up because she was too traumatized to stay there. The issue is that she was so traumatized that she stopped eating and she stopped sleeping. And this got so bad that she actually ended up having to go to the hospital because of it. She eventually got out of the hospital and she recovered, but she said that this was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to her and that she will never forget it. To this day, she thinks about it. So what do you guys think about this story? This is really weird because, and one of the reasons I told this story is because the third story, I think it was the third story I ever told. It might have been like, it was in the very beginning of me ever telling stories. Another girl experienced something like this, and I think it was in the Appalachian Mountains. I'll have to retell the story because it was a good story and I haven't told it for a year, and sometimes I'll retell stories that I've told a long time ago so that my new followers can hear them. And because sometimes, you forget stories. I don't like to do it often because I don't really like to retell stories on my account. I like them to be new, but I think it'd be interesting to retell that story because it's very similar to this one in ways where I've never heard of anyone seeing like a in the forest, and she described this as that, and so did the other girl that described, and it sounded very similar. I think they had similar features. I'll have to go back and watch the video, but it's weird that two different people sent me a story that was so similar. You guys remember that story that I'm talking about? It was like, I remember it was around Christmas time. I was wearing a red sweater that said like Mary on it or something like that. I don't know why I remember that. I had sunglasses on my head. I remember that. Anyways, what do you guys think of the story? What do you think it was? Drop in the comments. Drop your thoughts, opinions, suggestions. But as always, please be respectful.
Ever met someone that doesn't sit right with you and everyone adores them, but yet you have this feeling that there's something wrong? The reasons I'll be changing people's names in this story, and let's get into it. Says that after months and months of trying to find a job, of going through the struggle, bills piling up, she finally got a call back from a job. Now, did they offer her enough money for the job? She says no, they gave her the bare minimum, but she had no other choice. What could she do? So she took the job. She felt refreshed at the job, like everybody was united, everyone was like a family. But for some odd reason, the manager didn't sit well with her in her spirit. She said something was completely off and she could not put her finger on it. However, everyone swore that there was nothing wrong with the manager. She was sweet, she was kind, she was loving, she was giving, she was understanding. But Jen kept saying there was something off with her, but she could not understand what it was. Collectively, everybody decided to have a Christmas party for the employees at Olive Garden. Now, of course, Tina was the one managing everything because she was the manager, and she was the one that was helping fund the whole entire event. After the party was over, her ride never showed up to pick her up. So, of course, stressed out, she started asking her coworkers on who can take her home. Everyone declined except for Tina. Now, she didn't ask Tina for help, but Tina overheard and offered her help. That on her way home, Tina started asking her very personal questions about her life, her struggles, if she planning to have kids, does she have a boyfriend? All questions that Jen did not feel comfortable answering. And she told Tina, I don't feel comfortable answering these questions. It's very personal to me. If we can keep this work-related conversation, that would be fine. But I don't want to answer any questions about my personal life. I'm not that kind of person. I'm sorry. She didn't give any pushback. She said it was fine, no problem, and she dropped her off. That after a few weeks of working at the job, she ended up getting a promotion and she ended up getting Tina's position. Now, Tina ended up being let go a few weeks prior to that because of the fact that she was stealing. Now, what was she stealing? Jen doesn't know. She didn't ask questions. She was just grateful for the position and she was grateful for the opportunity and for the money as well, because that kind of helped her with her debt situation. Everything at work was going smoothly, but at home, everything was chaos. She couldn't understand what was going on in her private life. She couldn't understand. When she would get home from work, her fridge would be wide open, food all over the place, all over the counters, all over the walls, chairs stacked up on each other. She honestly thought someone was breaking in, a homeless person or something, and destroying her home while she was gone. However, there was never a door broken or a window broken or a lock broken, ever. Ever. So she couldn't understand what was going on. That one night she's on the phone with her girlfriend and her girlfriend's explaining to her, maybe you should go see someone. Maybe you have spirits in your home. Maybe they're upset that you're never home. I don't know, but figure something out. But there has to be somebody or something in your home that's either human or not destroying your home. And of course, Jen was like, what do you think? Spirits are mad that I have a full-time job now? And she's like, well, possibly. I don't know. Maybe. And then Jen says, okay, well, fine. Do you have anybody that you possibly know? And she says, yeah, you know what? I actually do. My aunt practices. She ended up going with her girlfriend to the practitioner's house. When she gets to the practitioner's house, she introduces herself. They start talking about what's going on in her house and everything that's been happening to her. And that's when the practitioner reveals to her that there's somebody at her job that's been doing work on her this whole entire time because she stole something from them. Now, of course, Jen says, I didn't steal anything from anyone. All I do is go to work, mind my business, and come home. And that's when the practitioner revealed, exactly, you've been going to work and doing what you gotta do and going home. She says, does anybody know from your job know where you live at? And that's when Jen says, yes, my old manager. And she says, what's your manager's name? So she started pulling cards on the manager's name, and it comes to find out that yes, it was Tina who was doing work on Jen. Now, Jen, of course, didn't believe it off the bat. She says, how is it possible that she's doing things inside my home? I've never invited her inside my home. And the practitioner says, there's something that she gave you that you brought inside the house. And she's like, there's no possible way. So of course, the practitioner keeps pulling out cards, and she says, there's something from outside that she gave you that you brought inside your home. You need to look around your house. There's something you brought from outside and you put it inside your home. And that's when it clicked for Jen. The only thing that she ever puts outside and brings back inside her home is her trash can. And that's when the practitioner says, I need you to check your trash can. There's something in there. And of course, Jen and her girlfriend leave, they go to her house, and they pull the trash can out of her garage. And that's when she takes the lid off the trash can and looks at the bottom of the trash can, and there it is. There's a chicken head at the bottom of her trash can. And Jen looks at her girlfriend like, this gotta be a joke, right? Her girlfriend's like, no, that's not a joke. So Jen goes to reach for the chicken head, and her girlfriend completely stops her and says to her, no, do not touch that thing. We need to go back and ask her what to do. And Jen's like, you think she'll be able to tell us what to do with a chicken head? We can't just pick it up and throw it out. She's like, no, you can't just pick it up and throw it out. Are you crazy? The practitioner's house. Jen tells the practitioner she found a chicken head in her trash can. And the practitioner tells her she needs to cleanse herself and her home before removing the chicken head altogether. And Jen did just that. She cleansed her house, cleansed herself, and then they removed the chicken head. Now, where did they put the chicken? I have no idea. She did not give that information. But what do you guys think that was? What do you think she was trying to do to Jen? And that's crazy. A chicken head, though?
Oh my goodness, guys, listen to this story that one of my followers sent into me. Her name is Cindy, and it is wild. There are so many layers to the story. Cindy says that she grew up in Virginia, but for the last 35 years, she lives in the Pacific Northwest. She says she's had a ton of spooky things happen to her over the years. Even growing up, she lived in a well-known local haunted house. But this story that she shared with me still has her frustrated and creeped out years later. So this happened to her when she was in high school, around the year 1984 to 1985. She mentions that she comes from a long line of very strong women who are not very sensitive, so living in or growing up in a haunted house really didn't bother them that much. Anytime something would ramp up, they would just reclaim their territory and squash it back down. She said it was such a part of their culture and family lore that no one really batted an eye about it. But this particular scenario wasn't even confined to their house, and nobody can explain it. She remembers it was close to school being out for the summer, and everybody was antsy to just get out and get to the beaches. So one day during school hours, Cindy's mother got a phone call from Mr. Culpepper from down the road. He claims that he saw her out on one of his boats. Mr. Culpepper had a boat rental, and his son was in Cindy's friend group. So when the boats weren't being used by the tourists, he let them go and take the boats out. But on this particular day, it was in the middle of a school day, and he saw her out on the water alone. So this alarmed him, so he immediately called her mother. So Cindy's mother comes straight home, and when she's pulling up, she notices she can see through the window of the home. She sees Cindy running up the stairs towards her bedroom. Her mother came running in, and she is yelling up to Cindy using all three of her names, and she said she could hear her sliding around upstairs. Cindy and her sister used to slide around on socks all the time, and so her mom's pretty pissed. So she stomps up there after her, but when she gets up there, she can't find Cindy. Now, there is no way that she could have gotten out of her third-story bedroom, so the mom turns back around and goes right over to Mr. Culpepper's. But when she gets there, he says, well, the boat's tied back up now, and I was busy in the shop, so I didn't see her bring it back. Cindy wants to make it very clear. She was a good kid. She had excellent grades, never got in trouble. She was in cheering and swim. She was not a kid that snuck out or played hooky, so her mother was getting very concerned and very aggravated about this. Okay, guys, this just keeps getting weirder. So her mother drives to the school and goes into the office and asks them about where she is. So at first they said that she should be in history class. So they go to send a runner to go get her from history class, but the cheer coach happened to be in the office too, and she stops the runner. And she goes, she's in my study hall. She's been there since the bell rang. She was like, I was just there with her. I just left. So they send the runner there instead. And when they get there, she's not there. And all the other kids said, Cindy's not here. She never was here. So now the coach is really confused and flustered. So she goes back to her room to look for Cindy, and she's not there. And turns out, she really was in history class. She said, in fact, she had a big report to give, and she was not just there, but she had been in all the classes all day long. Her mom personally validated this with every single teacher, and everyone confirmed that Cindy indeed was there all day. And so, like, only the cheer coach had a different story, and it shook her up. It shook her mom up, and Cindy too. I mean, there were 3 completely credible adults that saw Cindy in 3 different places, but she was in history the whole time. Remember, Mr. Culpepper saw her on the boat. Her mother saw her at the house, and her cheer coach saw her in class. And then all the rest of the teachers saw her on her day-to-day routine. And it's so crazy because it wasn't just all in an instant. It happened over a long period of the day. Her mom had worked on a naval base, so she drove an hour to get to the house, and then 15 minutes back to Mr. Culpepper's, and then another half an hour to the school. I mean, this was a crazy day. Her friends even verified that she was in the cafeteria when it was lunchtime eating with them. And then Cindy says that her being out in Mr. Culpepper's boat alone is the thing that creeps her out the most. She's like, I never would have done that. And for her mom, it was chasing her through the house to not find her after she could have sworn she definitely saw her. Cindy says that she wishes she had some big flashy ending, but they just have no idea. She said they've never gotten an explanation and nothing like that has ever happened again. And she said that they will never forget it. She can even remember how vividly she remembers the day. She remembers what her mom was wearing, and she remembers her report that she presented on Vietnam. Guys, let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. I know she'll be in there reading them. Are we talking mimics, doppelgangers, blending of timelines? I mean, there are so many possibilities and my mind is just blown. If you have a creepy or strange or spooky story you don't think anybody else would believe, please share it with me. And if you're new here, keep following for more creepy story time.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of this gay guy that was dating this rich businessman, and he was on the brink of exposing him, and this businessman decided to kill him and bury him in his cattle kraal. So for story's sake, we're going to call the gay dude Lucas, because we can't keep saying gay dude. That's just disrespectful. So Lucas was somebody that had just finished varsity probably 2 years ago, had started his first job, he was doing proper or whatever. And Lucas was somebody that I knew from a family member, and I used to see them sometimes, and Lucas was those type of people that would tell you you should never date somebody that's below you should always date higher, blah blah blah. Next time Lucas comes to visit, Lucas tells me how he met this businessman, but they're keeping things on the low, and he was just a happy guy, because what? Lucas bought a car that year. That guy bought Lucas a car, bought Lucas a house. Yeah? And Lucas would always brag and be like, Carla, when you grow up, you better be like me. And I was like, okay, clock it, I really respected that, because what? It was going great until Lucas came to visit us for a really long time. He came to visit me, my mom, and my siblings and all of that. But he stayed a really long time. It's not like it was something that was taboo for him to come visit, but aren't you going? What's happening? And I know Lucas to be someone that works, right? Because Lucas was an IT specialist and he was fresh out of varsity. So aren't you going to work? And I tell you, Lucas was always in the house, no going to work, nothing. And he told me that he had taken a leave and he decided to come visit us. And I was like, oh, okay. And you know how parents are very nosy. My mom came to me and she told, because I asked her, she didn't come to me. I asked her, why is Lucas here for such a long time? And she was like, Lucas basically is in trouble. Because that businessman that was buying him things, his wife found out about their relationship and his wife is trying to Lucas. So he's just trying to lay low and kind of let things simmer down, and then he's just gonna let things be. Lucas decides, no man, he can't live like this. He can't be living in the life of ducking and diving, and his leave was almost up. So Lucas was sitting on my bed. I remember it was the two of us in the house, and he was going back and forth with this business guy. So he tells this business guy, stop texting me, bruh. Your wife knows about us. This guy's like, no, I can't let you go. I love you, blah, blah, blah. And Lucas is like, bro, just let it go. It's okay, Guy keeps on begging. Lucas gives in. Lucas goes and has dinner with this guy. The wife comes after Lucas and is like, yeah, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna this, I'm gonna that. And Lucas literally Lucas sent this wife a message and was like, listen, you think me and your man were just going out to dinners? Because we were going out to dinners and booking hotels, and we were also doing the do. So if you threatening to do such things to me, The day that I feel like you're coming for me, I'm going to post each and every single video. Each and every single video of me and your man doing it in a hotel. So you better come right. You better come correct. Do you understand? And she was like, I send these videos to somebody, so if ever I come up missing or I ever die, I am going to post these videos on social media. So keep trying me. And I said, oh, okay. Girl, she said, Lucas sent the videos to his laptop, y'all. And I knew his laptop's password. So the laptop was at home when he left. When he went back to his apartment, his job and other dangas. The problem is Lucas decided to continue with this relationship with this guy, right? And so eventually Lucas was tired of this guy and he was like, I don't want to be with this person anymore, because Lucas had found somebody that he genuinely wanted to build something with. He found somebody that he wanted to date, and this businessman was not taking it well. He was just like, there is no way. If I can't have you, nobody can. Mind you, this person has a wife, has a whole wife and kids. Like, so one day, Lucas decides to go party with his now new boyfriend, and they go party at this place. And I don't know what happened. Apparently, they just heard gunshots, and somebody pointed the gun at Lucas and took Lucas, threw him in the car, and that was the last anybody saw Lucas. A couple of days go by, we're trying to call Lucas. You know, we call Lucas's mom, like, hey, girl, where's your son? You know, we're looking for your son. You know, it's been a while. We haven't reached him, and his boyfriend came here. And his boyfriend, guys, after this whole ordeal, after he had been thrown in the car, the following day, the boyfriend came to us. And we had been trying to reach Lucas's mom to understand if, like, the boyfriend is telling the truth or not, right? So, the mom was like, yeah, we even opened a case, but like, we have been looking for this person. We don't know where he is. Like, he disappeared into thin air. So, obviously, we were searching for this guy. Like, days went by, months went by. We are 3 years in since this person, I don't even remember how long it was, but we are in a couple of years in since this person disappeared, y'all. And we have never seen him till date. And there's nothing we can do to this businessman, because we can't accuse him of something that we don't know, we're not sure of, you understand? And even with that, bruh, like, we didn't see him take him. Like, it's a whole roller coaster, y'all. And we once went to this traditional healer, and he told us the traditional healer is someone, I think, that connects with spirits. And he told us that he could not connect with Lucas's spirit. Like, Lucas has already passed away, and you know, and wherever he's buried under a lot of things. Like, there are things that are walking on top of him, but he can't really tell what these things are, you know. But he is buried, and there's nothing we can do about it, because, you know. And so when we got to find out that this businessman had a farm, we were asking around, and you know, there were rumors that this guy Vele, you know, it's this thing, he analyzes people and he buries them right there. And even if we went to the police with that, like, I don't know, man, like, it just didn't work out. I'm pretty sure that case is closed and all of that. Like, it was sad. It's still sad to this day, because this person disappeared into thin air, and there's nothing that the police can do. We know that it is the businessman, but we can't say it's the businessman, because how can you point fingers at somebody without having evidence? You know, next thing we go there and we dig and we don't find anything. What's gonna happen? You know, like, yeah.
Someone just sent me the wildest email, and I have no idea if it's real or if it's completely made up. So I'll let you guys be the judge. Thomas is 21 years old. He recently moved to New Orleans. For the past couple weeks, he has been visiting this cookie shop called Cousins Dozens that allegedly sells cookies that all have magical powers. I'll go ahead and put a list of the cookies right here and list what they all do. I would probably choose the chocolate chip cookie one because I'm all about love and like happiness. But Thomas went ahead and chose the peanut butter one because he has a really hard time falling asleep at night. Not thinking that this was ever gonna work, because he doesn't believe in magic, he doesn't believe in voodoo or any of that. He decided to just buy the peanut butter one and take it home. After he ate it, Thomas says that he has never had a more peaceful sleep in his entire life. He says that whatever's in this cookie had him sleeping so good that the next morning when he got up to go to the gym, it was like a walk in the park, because he was so rested that this cookie literally changed his entire life. After that, he became very interested and decided to set up an appointment with the shop's owner. Mind you, he lives in New Orleans, but he works in advertising. So he was so impressed by these cookies that he wanted to sit down with the owner and get more information on the ingredients of the cookie, and maybe offer her like some sort of advertising like package where he could help her get the word out on how amazing these cookies are and like hopefully help her like grow her shop. The owner completely shut him down right away and told him that she wasn't interested in advertising or telling him like the secrets of the cookies, that she was not interested in any of it. He tried really hard to like get her to change her mind, but she was pretty persistent, and towards the end she kind of just told him that she would think about it. As he was leaving the shop, he comes across like one of like the workers that works there. It was like this older man in the front. The older man goes and hands Thomas a gingerbread cookie. Thomas is a little bit confused because the gingerbread cookies are not on like the list of the 12 cookies that they sell, and the older man tells him that that's like a special edition one, that they don't sell that because that cookie is extremely powerful. So apparently the gingerbread comes in a bag full of 12 of them. They're called the baker's dozen. They're too powerful to sell, and warned him that the baker is a real Bayou witch who works with Thomas just kind of grabbed the cookie and left. He says that when the man was telling him this, he looked like a little deranged. After Thomas got home, he was like helping his wife like set up like their 3-year-old. They have a 3-year-old that they were trying to like feed dinner to. His wife started arguing with him because she believes that Thomas is having an affair with one of his workers. So it's like a constant argument that they have back and forth. Thomas is pretty much just pleading with her, trying to tell her like that's not the truth, but his wife is just getting more and more angry. Thomas decided to make a cup of coffee and sit down and eat one of the gingerbread cookies when his wife comes out and yells at him again, accusing him of having an affair. He dips the gingerbread cookie in the hot coffee and it burns his wife's leg. Apparently these cookies affect whoever you are thinking of, and whatever you do to that cookie, you do to the person. So it ends up harming the person. So now he has these 12 gingerbread cookies that he has no clue what to do with, and he was hoping that maybe someone listening to the story would have some sort of insight on what he should even do with these cookies and where they even came from, or any information would be super helpful. I'm actually gonna look up to see if there's actually a bakery called Cousin Dozens in New Orleans. I probably should have started there before I posted this. But like always, let me know what you guys think down in the comments.
Let's read a couple scary stories that were sent to us. So I'm friends with this guy I met in a VR game recently. We started playing together a lot and I really got to know him. He said he lived with his parents in the Appalachian Mountains, so I asked, have you ever had anything scary happen to you? And he told me that back when he was younger, he used to be a really dumb kid and used to climb on the roof of their house and scream very loudly after seeing a video of a Skiggly Wiggly story in the Appalachians. He told me that in the video it said not to whistle at night, and as you might have guessed, he climbed up onto the roof around 1 a.m. and he whistled. For a while nothing happened, but after about half an hour, he heard a faint scream in the distance, followed up by a deep roar. He said it didn't sound like a bear or anything that we know of, and he later told me he thought it was a good idea to sneak out at night even though his parents told him not to. So he waited a few weeks, and one evening while his parents weren't home, he went out into the woods. He said he walked for like a mile when he heard fast and loud footsteps to his left. He looked but didn't see anything, but all of a sudden he heard a roaring sound above him, and when he looked up, he saw something that didn't look human. He began to run back home, but he could hear this thing right behind him. Just when he thought it was over, gunshots rang out from the nearby road. Turns out his dad was on his way home, driving by the forest, and he heard the roar and saw my friend running from something, so he shot at it. 3 weeks later or so, my friend kept hearing tapping on his roof. One day, he opened the windows and something grabbed him, but he was able to get away. Luckily, his parents believed him and they moved houses, but they still live in the Appalachian Mountains. Finally, parents that believe their kid. And don't be whistling at night. Okay, this next one is from the Philippines. My roots come from spiritual healers. The line ended with my great-grandma when she failed to pass it down. I was in the province to visit my friends and family, and one thing to note is that the house I was staying in was filled with historical relics. In that house, there was a bayonet that was used in the Second World War and a mirror that predated American colonization. The visit was normal at first. Then at night, we were sharing scary stories, and my eldest cousin recalled how one of my cousins, let's call him Roger, was once swayed around in a swing by an entity. We laughed it off. Some were scared, some were messing around. The first and second days were normal, riding bikes, motorcycles, setting off firecrackers, the usual stuff boys would get into when left alone. The third day was rather eerie. I was alone in the living room beside that old mirror when the power suddenly went out. It was sunset, but because of the house's positioning, it was completely dark inside. I noticed one of the doors inside the house had opened. It was odd because the door automatically closes, but somehow it was now open. I went to see what caused this strange phenomenon. However, as I got closer, a figure materialized in front of me. I don't know if it was an Oswang because I only saw the silhouette, but it reached its hands out to me, calling for my hand. But before I could touch its hand, the power came back on and the door closed. I told this story to my cousin Roger, and he said that if I were to touch that figure, it would have taken me to a place that is not of this realm. Okay, so I looked up what an Oswang was. I hope I'm saying that right. It is the most feared shape-shifting monster in Filipino folklore, often described as a blood-sucking, flesh-eating creature with vampiric or ghoul-like tendencies. Well, it's a good thing you didn't touch it, because that sounds really scary.
There was this airline pilot who told this very terrifying story. He said at the time he was working as a commercial airline pilot. And this one particular flight, they were going from New York to San Francisco. So they were about 3 hours into the flight, and they were at cruising altitude. They were somewhere around 38,000 feet. And he said he gets this call from the stewardess into the cockpit, and she says, "We have a passenger that seems very agitated. They are freaking out, and they keep saying that there's something following the plane, and that there is something outside of the window." So the pilot tells the stewardess, just keep me updated. If things get worse, let me know and we'll come up with a plan of execution. About 5 to 10 minutes later, once again, the stewardess calls the cockpit, and she says, he's getting worse. He's very agitated. He's saying that there's a cloud following the plane. He said, we're being chased by a cloud, and he keeps saying it over and over again. He's pointing to the window. So the pilot goes, well, does he seem like he's on something? Does he seem like, there's something wrong with him? She said, no, he's a nice, clean-cut man. He's well-dressed, and he seems terrified. The pilot said, okay, continue to just keep him calm and continue to keep me updated. So as he's, flying the plane, he starts thinking about, terrified. Like, why would he be terrified? What was scaring him? And then shortly after that, another 5 or 10 minutes, once again, the stewardess calls, and she says, he is very erratic now, and we need to do something about this. And next thing he knows, this man comes charging towards the cockpit and starts banging on the door. And she says, Captain, he says he wants to speak to you. He said it's imperative that he speaks to you. So the captain says, okay, put him on the intercom. So the captain's like, hey, I'm the captain of this plane. What seems to be the problem? He says, there is a cloud that's following this plane. When shortly after we took off, I seen this thing out the window, and it's been following us ever since. And he said, there's something about it. Something's going to happen to us. Something is wrong. And the pilot said, we're at 38,000 feet. There's no clouds. There's no other aircraft on the radar. Like, it's completely clear out here. So he says, you know what? I'll check out the window. So this guy tells him, where he's seen the cloud, by the left side of the plane near the tail. So the pilot's able to look out a side window in the front of the cockpit, and there's absolutely nothing. It's just clear, dark skies. So he tells the man, I don't see anything. I think you're just panicking because, people get afraid flying. Just sit down, relax. So the guy, sits down, and pilot continues to fly. Well, that's when his co-pilot's like, there's something strange on the radar. And when they look on the weather radar, they see this small little blip. Looks like a tiny little cloud. And it's right behind the plane. And it does seem like it's following them. And this thing is blinking off and on to the radar. And so he says, man, that's right where that guy said this cloud would be. So he's, hold on one second. So he radios to the flight attendant, and he's like, let me talk to this guy. So the guy comes up, and he's still frantic. And he says, what does this cloud want? Why is it following us? And he said, look, this cloud, it's taken down many planes, and it always follows aircraft. And the only thing you can do is ignore it. Do not talk about it. Do not acknowledge it. Do not say anything about it. Just ignore it. And so the pilot then, gets off the intercom with him, and he continues to fly the plane. He said as he looked out the window into the darkness, he could see something that was darker than dark. It was this black blob that was behind the plane. So he just turned his head and he ignored it, and he flew all the way to San Francisco. The plane lands, and they get everybody off the plane and stuff. And when they start doing inspections on the plane or whatever, they find that there was some sort of mechanical issue that could have caused the plane to go down. So he starts wondering, I wonder who this passenger was and how he knew all this information. What did he know about this cloud? What was this? So he looks on the flight logs, and he can't seem to find a passenger sitting in that seat. They do have him on the security cameras, but he cannot identify this person. He said that was probably the creepiest flight he's ever been on in his 30 years of flying. Idaho is one of those strange places that people don't really go to. It's up there, situated in the Pacific Northwest. Most people just drive through the northern portion of the state, and you almost kind of forget that that state even exists. In the southern portion of Idaho, it's this very remote area, and a lot of strange things occur here. Now, there's a place known as the Owyhee Mountains, and the Native Americans have this legend about something they called the Sheep Snatchers. Now, the Sheep Snatchers, they believed, were this lost tribe that lived up in the mountains. They were supposedly cannibals. And from time to time, when they were very hungry, it said that they would come down from the mountains and they would steal livestock from some of the local tribes. And there was even a story back in the 1800s. These 5 hunters, they go into the Owyhee Mountains and they never returned. So their family was worried about them. They form a search party. They end up finding them up in the mountains in this small cabin that's locked from the inside. The windows are locked. And they find these 5 men, all deceased, with their heads having been completely smashed. There have been stories of sheep herders or sheep farmers who have seen these men come down from the mountains that look like very tall men wearing the skeleton of a sheep's head or a sheep's skull. And they come down, they steal sheep, they throw them over their shoulders, and they carry them back up the mountain. Do you have any strange stories from Idaho? Lucid dreaming is a dream, essentially, that you have when you're awake. It's sort of the emergence of reality versus the dream world. Now, thousands of people every year report having lucid dreams, and sometimes these dreams can be terrifying. Now, there was this man named Christopher. Christopher said one night he was asleep, and he began to have this dream. And he said in this dream, he was in this neighborhood. He said one side of the neighborhood, there were all these rundown, old abandoned homes, and it was really dark, and it was kind of eerie. And then he said on the other part of this neighborhood, there were all these beautiful brand new homes, and it just looked like a place you wanted to live. And he said he remembered being approached by this man, well dressed in a suit and tie, slicked back hair. The man said, "Hey, my name is Henry, and I'm your realtor, and I'm going to show you your house." So this man, he said, took him into this beautiful home and said, "This is your new home. This is where you're going to live." And Christopher was like, "Hey, what's the deal with the other part of the neighborhood? Why is it so dark and creepy looking?" And Henry said, "Oh no, we don't talk about that place. You're not even supposed to mention it. You could be in trouble now." And he says, "We know that you're not sleeping. You're really awake. And they're going to be coming for you now." He's like, "Who's going to be coming?" And he said he just walked into a closet and disappeared. And he said the next thing he knew, these SUVs started pulling up. These black SUVs pulled up in front of this house. And he took off running. And he said he ended up into this dark, creepy part of the neighborhood. And he said as he made his way into this kind of labyrinth, he sees these 30, 40-foot tall, dark, shadowy figures moving about the homes, chasing him. He said that's when he awoke, and he found himself down the street from his house, outside, and he said he had no idea how he got out there. But that's not all. He said when he looked over up on one of the houses, he sees one of these very tall beings, entities, dark, shadowy figures moving amongst the houses. And then he said it just disappeared and he was awake. And he realized it was a dream, but he said, how did I manage to get outside the house and go down the street? There's another woman named Lucy. Lucy said, one night she was having this lucid dream. She said she awoke and she knew she was awake, but part of her room looked like her room. And she said the other part of the room was like this dark, wet cave. And she could hear the sounds of water like dripping. And as she looks over into the corner of this sort of cave, she said she sees these shadowy figures. She said out of the darkness they came. And these were men. Except their upper part of their bodies, their torsos, right, were flipped upside down. Their head was where their stomach should be. And the top part of their torso was up here. And she said they started saying to her, "You're dreaming. And you're never going to wake up. We're taking you with us and we're going to keep you from waking up." She said the next thing she knows, she's being dragged out of her bed and down into this cave. And that's when she awoke fully, and she found herself in the hallway, partially inside her bedroom, going through the doorway. And she had no idea how she got off the bed and moved all the way out the door. This third story, there was this man named Peter. Peter said that one night he had a lucid dream. And he said in this dream he awoke and there was these three beings standing around him. And he said they look like the gray aliens you see in movies. And he said they were just holding hands, standing around him, staring. And he said that's when he floated above his bed. And he said the window in his bedroom opened up and he started to go out the window. But then he awoke and he said he was back in his bed. But the weird thing was his window was open and he never opened that window before.
Let's read a true and scary story. I am no stranger to the paranormal or the unexplained. I've always been sensitive to strange things, and I have a lot of stories from my childhood that I still can't make sense of. I promise these are 100% true, and they all take place in the Western Cape of South Africa. I'll share two of my most vivid ones. I have always felt like something is watching me. When I was young, around 5, my uncle died. My parents explained that he was now watching over us, so naturally, I assumed that the watch sensation I got when I was alone was him, even though it didn't feel friendly. When I was 15, I started having a lot of issues in my life. I was suffering from intense insomnia and night terrors, as well as a typical depression that comes with hormones. During this time, that watch sensation seemed to intensify. It was then that I started to realize that this entity, whatever it was not a friendly one, and therefore definitely not my uncle. It felt like the more tired and depressed I became, the less I was able to keep it away, and the closer it came. There were many nights where I would wake up in the few hours of sleep I could manage with an intense burning feeling that someone was watching me. My heart would race and I could feel a presence staring down at me so strongly. But every time I worked up the courage to look, there was never anyone there. Eventually, I began waking up to breathing down my neck. I could literally feel the hairs moving from the sensation. I managed to catch glimpses of this thing every now and again. The most vivid time was when I opened my bedroom door and clearly saw a tall, dark entity, what looked like a man wearing a top hat, slinking under my bed. His features weren't clear, but the smirk on his face and his piercing bright eyes definitely were. The moment I decided I needed to ask an adult for help was after I woke up to someone yanking my wrist, trying to pull me out of bed. I actually had bruises on my wrist for the next few days. I eventually told my mom, who is a strict non-believer, and for some reason, maybe the panic on my face, she believed me. We made a game plan. I started saying prayers over my room every night before bed and sleeping with the Bible under my pillow. It seemed to work because I haven't felt its presence since then. However, years later, I finally confided in my sister about this story. My sister often has unexplainable dreams that later turn out to be true. When I started describing what the entity looked like, her whole face went white. Apparently, when she was around 5 or 6, she had one of the most vivid dreams of her life, so vivid that she still remembers it clearly. I was around 2 or 3 at the time, sleeping in my room. She was sleeping between my parents that night. In her dream, she woke up to the sound of pots and pans being moved. She went into the kitchen to see what was happening and saw my parents sort of aimlessly moving things around. She froze because she had just crawled out from between them. She ran to my room to save me, but paused at the door. There was a man, tall and thin, with a top hat, leaning down over me, watching. Then apparently another me pulled her under the bed and told her to stay quiet because he didn't know it wasn't really me in the bed. She woke up screaming in real life and was inconsolable until my mom went in and woke me up to prove I was okay. It was reassuring to know that someone else had seen the same entity and that it wasn't all in my mind. But it also shook me to my core because part of me wishes it had just been a vivid imagination, instead of being followed by the top hat man for 15 years of my life. The second story happened years later and is completely unrelated, but it still gives me chills. I was 20 and babysitting for a family I worked for. It was around midnight and I had just gotten the kids home from an event their parents were at. They were fast asleep in bed. I decided to make myself some tea in the kitchen while I set up the baby monitors. The kitchen in this house was right off the lounge area, which had glass walls all around, so you were essentially on display to the neighborhood at night. As I was making my tea, the hairs on the back of my neck suddenly stood up. I was hit with an oppressive, overwhelming feeling that I needed to run and hide. I looked around, trying to understand what was happening, but I saw nothing. I decided it was all in my mind and went back to what I was doing. Then, all of a sudden, the gate bell started ringing. The noise was so jarring in the quiet night that I jumped and ran to the phone, terrified it would wake the kids. When I answered, all I heard was heavy breathing. Freaked out, I put the phone down and crept to one of the windows where I could see the gate. There were no bushes or trees nearby where someone could hide. Truly no one. The bell rang again. Still no one. It rang about 2 more times after that. At that point, I tried to convince myself it was faulty wiring and attempted to calm down. But then, the house alarm went off. There were security beams all around the house, and somehow they had been tripped. I was beside myself. I went to check on the kids before phoning the parents. I felt awful calling them while they were out enjoying themselves, trying to explain something I couldn't even understand. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The parents agreed to send the security team to do a round outside of the house. I remember waiting on the couch when I noticed a dark figure on the other side of the frosted glass at the front door. I ran to the kids' room and stayed with them until security arrived. They ended up not finding anything. I did not sleep that night, and from then on, I made sure to close the curtains before dark anytime I babysat. Thank you, Courtney, for sending this one in. This was super spooky, and I know that you said these 2 stories were unrelated, but it's kind of interesting that they were both dark figures watching you. It's kind of interesting, too, because the first one sounds similar to the Hat Man, like a dark silhouette with a top hat, which is mostly a creature that people see during sleep paralysis. So the fact that you were awake and you saw the Hat Man is so mind-boggling to me. Thank you again for sending this one in. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can. And I will see you in the next one.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
There is something that stays around me that mimics my husband. It mimics his looks and his voice. I see this thing every so often. Most recently, I had a full conversation with it about ice cream. That story's somewhere on my page if you want it. But I had a really bad experience last night. I've caught this thing on camera. I've had full conversations with it. I've seen it in reflections of things. This is the scariest experience that I've ever had with it. I don't know why this one scared me so bad, but let's get into it. So last night, my husband left to go to the gym, and he left wearing like black basketball shorts and a black shirt. So he's gone. He's like 40 minutes in, I think, at this point, and I hear a door open and shut downstairs, followed by another door opening and shutting like he's putting his shoes in the coat closet. A few minutes pass. I wait for him to come up. I register that it's weird because he always calls me on his way home and he didn't. But I was like, oh, maybe he forgot or something like that. So a few minutes pass and he has not come upstairs. And not only that, I am hearing the opening and shutting of those doors again. More time passes, I hear the doors one more time, and I check his location because we share it on that Find My iPhone thing. It shows his location at the house. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's just doing stuff downstairs. I don't know, maybe he's like doing the surprise for me because he randomly does that. More time passes, I check his location again because at this point I'm like, is he outside? Because it's kind of showing that he's beside our house instead of in it. So I'm like, did his phone like die and he's trying to get in the house and that's what the knocking is? And at this point, my brain is like, did someone break into your house because it's nighttime? So at the risk of it being a break-in because I'm hearing these noises, I decide to just call him. And when he answers and I hear gym noises in the background, my heart sinks. Tell him what's going on. I'm like, I thought you were downstairs. I think someone's in the house. Should I call 911? By the time I finish the sentence, this man is already out the door of the gym. And I check his location out of curiosity, and it is now saying he's at the gym. It's not saying he's here anymore. He's like, lock the door of the bedroom, stay in there, I am on my way. So whenever he gets here, he says he's pulling into the parking lot of our apartments, and the phone goes. So I wait upstairs until I hear the door open, and then I come out of the bedroom and come downstairs. As I go around the curve of our stairs, I see my husband walk by the stairs. He didn't address me, but I assume he's just checking the house. So I call for him, still nothing. I come down the stairs and I look to my left and see him coming around the corner to this area that I'm in the kitchen. And I'm like, why isn't he speaking to me at this point? So I start walking, I'm in my dining room, and I hear the keys turn in the door behind me. I turn around and come face to face with my husband, who is walking in the front door behind me. He was not in the kitchen, he was not in the house yet. So he comes in, checks the house, everything's fine, all the doors were locked, all the windows were locked and shut. He was like, I told you to stay in the bedroom until I got inside, what are you doing? And I was like, you were in here, like I saw you. So now he's freaked out. We go to bed feeling weird, the house feels weird, everything just feels gross. And I wake up to this morning. Keep in mind, I have mentioned nothing on TikTok about this. I've mentioned nothing to no one about this other than my husband. But I am met with this comment. I'm feeling the doppelganger through this video. Be careful this week. And they have been right about a lot of the things that they have sensed in my videos and that I have seen and just not said anything. So this sent absolute chills down my spine. Because I filmed the video that they commented that on right here, right where that doppelganger or mimic ended up coming. Like, this is where they walked to. So not only did I acknowledge this thing and call for it, I followed it. And I don't want to know what would have happened if I had ended up in the kitchen, cornered. I'm so sorry this video was so long. I'm just scared. I also had another really, really bad experience happen a few days ago, and I'm still trying to decide if I want to share that one. If I do, it'll be this weekend because I'm trying to let the energy go away from it. But it's been a lot. A lot has been going on.
A lot of times when I see these videos, you'll see people in the comments saying they don't have a psychic come in, don't give it any energy, don't feed into it. And so I want to clear up a couple things. When you bring in a medium that works out of integrity and understands the job, this actually will help clear a situation like this. What we don't want to do is engage the energy regularly, especially if it's starting to make us feel bad or we're unsure about what it is. But for those that are new to paranormal experiences, I think the curiosity is healthy and important because it empowers this woman and her husband to take control of their home how they see fit, not how someone else tells them they should do it. When we are learning about the paranormal, when we are learning about our spirit side, it doesn't matter what religion you are, we always have to experience a darker side of it to understand the lighter side. You have to understand both sides. So this is what they are experiencing. Unfortunately, this energy feels very dark and very destructive and very manipulative. We're actually doing a series on our Patreon. The Mimic will be a part of that. So we'll go into a lot more detail over on our Patreon. Speaking to this specific Mimic, this is a being that is not alien and not a spirit who has recently passed and is sort of stuck in realms. They are not either of those things. I'd love to hear people who've had their own experiences with mimics in the comments. We learn the most through other people's experiences. So if this mimic isn't alien, and if this mimic is not a spirit that has since left a human body, what is it? It's showing me its ability to morph in and out like a shapeshifter, but from a very dark space. Not all shapeshifters are dark. This is a shapeshifter that looks to aggravate, manipulate, and control. It, in a sense, feeds off of energetic curiosity and naivety, and it looks to build a base of, ready for this, humans who will support it and join it in its desire to cause chaos. One of the things I'm hearing really clear, I'm being reminded of people who always say, people who are experienced with Appalachia and mimics will say, don't respond to them, don't acknowledge them. If you hear it, don't react to it. This is 100% accurate. These are difficult to remove. And I have removed a lot of deeply difficult entities. But it can be removed. But in order to remove it, it requires everyone who lives in that home to be on board. Its sole purpose is not to mess with these guys individually. They're trying to gather a collective of individuals that they can control. And you might ask, well, how does that happen? You will notice that your mind and your choices, it numbs you a little bit. This being will numb you to self-expression. It will numb you to self-empowerment, to making healthy choices that are good for you. It will turn you inward, almost into like a state of deep depression, so that you can then be controlled. This is scary. For any video that I stitch, I will always offer my services for free if anyone ever needs that support. Any medium that specializes in that type of work can help them. It does not need to be me. For those that are watching and you're feeling the energy, let's do a quick grounding and releasing. 3 releasing breaths. So deep inhale through the nose. Deep inhale through the nose. Exhale, blow it out. 2 more times. Deep inhale through the nose. Blow it out. 1 more. Make sure your feet are planted firmly on the ground. If you're laying down, palms face down on the earth. Close the eyes. Feel yourself rooted, sinking deep into the earth, locking you in, seeing a ray of light moving from the tailbone down deep into the center of the earth, locking you in, anchoring you, holding you. Feel the energy run through the feet and the hands deep into the center of the earth, releasing anything you no longer need. The earth will take that energy and recycle it. So we inhale, and as we exhale, see, feel, imagine, push the energy down into the center of the earth, releasing it, letting it go. Feel the body sink deep into the center of the earth, growing heavy. Feeling the feet, the hands, the legs, the arms. And then visualizing, imagining, seeing, feeling a light that comes from the cosmos, a light blue, crystal white light. And it comes down into the third eye and washes over you, cleanses you, protects you, clears you. You are grounded. You are clear. You are strong. And you know who you are. Sit in this light for as long as you need to, allowing the light to heal you, to fill you, to ground you. You are safe. You are clear. And you're strong.
Have you ever had sleep paralysis? Now, one of the things that people tell me who've experienced sleep paralysis is that they often see these very dark negative entities. Is this just simply a side effect of sleep paralysis, or is something else happening? Now, this is a story that I had heard out of Tennessee. There was this man who one day he went to bed, and he said he just had this dream, but in his dream it felt really real. Like he woke up, he went to work, he, ate dinner and did everything throughout his whole entire day, but it was just a dream. And then he woke up. We said as he woke up, he noticed he could not move his body. And he just felt like something was wrong, and he felt just this sense of dread. And he said all of a sudden, he sees something come up on the side of him. And he said it was this gray looking being with sharp nails, jagged teeth, solid black eyes, no hair. And this thing was just sort of looking at him and staring at his face. And he said this thing just kind of got up and it walked around his room and was kind of making this almost hissing type sound. And he said then all of a sudden it was he finally woke up and everything was all right. And he looked around his room, that thing, whatever it wasn't there. So he went and talked to his friend about it the next day, and his friend said, you probably had sleep paralysis. And he thought, well, I don't know much about that, but maybe you're right. So next night he goes to bed, right? And same thing happens. He has the same dream that he goes throughout his day, and then he wakes up and he can't move. And once again, he sees this thing in his room. And he said this thing went over to his dresser and opens the dresser up and starts pulling his clothes out and is looking at it and kind of moving it around. And then he said this thing was just kind of going around his room looking through all of his stuff. And then he once again wakes up and this thing is no longer in his room. And this went on for weeks. But he said he started to notice as this progressed, it was harder and harder for him to wake up. And no matter how hard he tried, it would just take forever for him to kind of get through this dream. So he said this one specific night, everything happens the same and he wakes up, can't move. And that thing was in his room. And he said this thing just sort of lifted up his shirt and then scratched him on his chest. And then he lifted up his pant leg and moved his, claws down his leg and like scratched his leg. And he was trying his hardest to wake up. And he said he could hear his roommate outside, like talking out of the room, but he couldn't scream. He couldn't say anything to like get his friend's attention. And then finally, boom, he like woke up. And when he woke up, he said he felt like burning on his stomach or on his chest and on his leg. And when he looked, he had scratch marks, that were actually there from his dream. And so he told his friend, like what was going on. And he showed him the scratch marks. And he said, well, have you thought about like doing sort of this like sage blessing over your room and stuff? So he did some research. He got some sage, and he said he did this like sage thing over his room. And after that, the dreams stopped and they went away. But he always like thought about, could it ever come back? That Arizona is considered a hotspot for alien abductions. It's estimated that there are around 12 to 1,400 reports every year of people claiming to have encountered extraterrestrials. Now, there was this man named Chris. Chris and his 5 friends decided that they were going to go camping about 30 miles east of Flagstaff. Now, him and his friends, they set off for this 3-day camping trip from Phoenix. And along their route, they find this small little convenience store. So they stop off to get some supplies. As they're walking up to this place, they notice this older Native American man sitting out front. And he starts saying some stuff, but it was in like the Navajo language, so they didn't understand what he was talking about. And he kept pointing to the sky and saying the same thing over and over again. So when they go inside this store, they talk to this lady behind the counter. They say, who's that man out front? She goes, oh, that's my grandfather. He doesn't speak English, and he has dementia. And sometimes he, just says random things. And like when he was younger, his brother disappeared, and he always has this memory of his brother being like taken, and so he thinks that his brother was taken by the stars. So they thought, that's kind of weird. It's kind of creepy. So they get in their car and they end up going to their campsite. Well, at night, one of Chris's friends has a guitar, so he starts playing some songs and they start singing along. That's when they notice this strange star up in the sky. But it wasn't a star, it was moving. And they watched this star slowly make its way behind a mountain range and disappear. They thought, must have been like a shooting star. So Chris's friends decide they're all going to go to sleep for the night. They get in their tents. Chris decides he's going to stay out and sit near the fire for a little bit. As he's sitting by the fire, he starts to doze off. And he said that's when he awakes to this strange humming sound that was just repetitive. And as he opens his eyes, all he could see were these flashing bright lights. And the next thing he knows, he said he was in the tent and he was waking up. His friends were all asleep and he started to just kind of freak out. He started to panic. So he's like, I need to get outside the tent, like something's going on. So he starts looking for the zipper in the tent, but he can't find the zipper. And he's like, where is the door? Like, there's no door. And everywhere he looked, it was just canvas. Like, there was no zipper to get out of this tent. So he starts waking up all his friends, and he's like, look, we're trapped in this tent. Like, something has sealed us in. But that's when they discover somehow the tent had turned on its side at night. But everything was in its perfect place. It hadn't moved. So they couldn't figure out how this tent ended up on its side. And that's why they couldn't get out. The zipper was on the ground. Well, the next day, Chris starts feeling really, really sick. And he's vomiting. And he's tired. And he didn't want to do anything. So his friends say, maybe we should go back into town. Like, you're not feeling good. I don't think this is a good idea. But Chris is like, no, I'm fine. I'll get better. Like, let's just stay. So that night, they go to bed. They're all in their tents. And at 3 a.m., all of them wake up. Except for Chris. And for some reason, they had this very uneasy feeling. And that's when they started to hear these strange vocalizations. It sounded like some kind of weird language or chatter going on outside the tent. And right at that moment, Chris stood straight up and he started to scream. But it wasn't a normal human scream. It was something else. They said Chris started to contort his body and twist and turn. And they didn't know what to do to get you back home. Like, something's wrong with you. And he's like, no. I'm actually good. Like, I feel much better. Like, let's stay one more day. So the next day they go hiking and, he feels better again. But that night when they go to bed, he starts having this dream. He said in the dream he was out in the desert and there were all of these faces following him, just staring at him. And he said he kept seeing these flashing lights coming from behind the mountain. The next thing he knew, he woke up and he was in the middle of the desert. And he had no recollection how he had got there. So he makes his way back to the campsite. And when he gets there, his friends are freaking out. Like, where did you go? Like, what happened? And he goes, I don't know. I just found myself in the middle of the desert. And they said, well, you told us you were going to go use the restroom and you never came back. And he's like, I don't remember any of that. So right at that moment, they all hopped in the car and they left. And he said he couldn't help but remember what that man had said about the stars taking his brother. I grew up in a town called Peoria, and we had this legend of the Dingling Man. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but there was this real guy, which everyone in town called the Dingling Man. And he was like this 6'4", 6'5", tall, scary looking dude that had these very long dreads that like covered his face and these very creepy eyes. And like he never cut his fingernails. And you would see this dude everywhere in town. And like when we were kids, we'd be playing at the park or we'd be in a field playing football. And there would be the Dingling Man just standing there, like staring at us. And he would talk to himself, like he would, like laugh. And then he would like hum sometimes. And that was the scariest because he'd be like, hum, 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 hum. And so like when you would hear that, it just freak you out because this dude was staring at you. And like he would chase, a lot of us kids around town and stuff. And like people would like see him like just jump like over 6-foot fences like it was nothing. And this dude would like climb up trees and stuff. And one story that I heard about the Dingling Man that's probably the creepiest was there was this kid, he was coming home from school. He unlocks his front door, goes inside, goes upstairs, and when he gets ready to go into his bedroom and he turns, there is the Dingling Man standing by his window with the window like wide open. And he's sitting there going, like humming. And so this kid just like ran downstairs, runs out the front door, and his dad, like right at that time, pulled up from work. And he's like, Dad, like the Dingling Man's in my room. And so like the dad grabs a baseball bat and he goes into the house, goes upstairs into his room, and like he's gone. But he could see that the window was open, so he knew someone was in his room. And so he locked all the windows and the doors. The desert at night is a really terrifying place. Now, you ask anyone who lives alone in the middle of the desert, when night falls, strange things happen. Now, there was this man named Dave. Dave and his friend decided they were going to do some hiking. And they found this 5-mile trail out in the Superstition Mountains. So Dave gets his father's hunting backpack and some hiking boots, and they head out to the Superstition Mountains. When they get there and they get on the trail, they get about halfway, about 2 miles into this hiking trail, when they see this rock formation off the trail. So they decide to go to it and take some pictures. When they make their way to this rock formation, they start to realize that they couldn't find the trail again and that they were lost. And they start to panic because the sun was starting to go down. So Dave, having lived in the desert for some time, realized that it would be dangerous for them to walk in that terrain late at night. And so he decided they should just stay put. Well, they put their backpacks down and they sat back to back. And as the sun went down over the mountains, it became pitch black. They could not see anything in front of their face. About an hour after the sun went down, they started to hear these whistles. And it sounded like someone was blowing some sort of horn or whistle, and it was just repetitive over and over again. Soon the desert went quiet. But then they can hear what sounds like some sort of scurrying amongst the brush. And soon they could hear noises all around them. At first they were thinking it was a mountain lion or coyotes, but they knew they weren't alone. As they sit there in the pitch black and it's just total darkness, they can hear something start to move closer to them. And that's when Dave feels something on his leg and he realizes something is sniffing him. And then whatever this is just walks back into the desert. And that's when Dave realizes, wait a second, I have my dad's hunting bag and inside is this thermal monocular. I can use this to see in the dark and we can figure out what is around us. So he pulls out the monocular, he turns it on, and when he looks out into the desert, he can see what look like these very skinny men walking on all fours, just crawling around the desert. And that's where he sees this hole in the side of a hill. And he said these things were going in and out of it almost like they were ants. And for hours, they watched these things just walking, crawling through the desert all around them. And then finally, as the sun starts to rise, these things go back into this hole and into the earth. And that's when they got up and they made their way out of there. And eventually they found a trail and they were able to get back home. But he said still to this day, he does not like to go to the Superstition Mountains.
No secret that serial killers use highways to find their victims. In 2009, the FBI established the Highway Serial Killer Initiative to try to get ahead of this problem because it has happened so many times. I-40 is a big problem, but if you're along US Route 45, you're going to want to hear this story. This came from Kelsey, and she says she was almost kidnapped by a truck driver while driving this route. If you're new here, this is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series where we share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unbelievable things that they've ever experienced. Kelsey said when this happened, she was in the Baldwin, Mississippi area, and she was driving to Water Valley, which is just past Oxford, Mississippi, about 2 hours away from where she lives, and she was on her way to see the guy that she was dating at the time. She was using her grandmother's car. From the way she described this stretch of road that she was on, it was like traffic light after traffic light after traffic light. And she gets caught behind this white semi who she didn't really want to be behind because she was kind of in a hurry to get there. And she said every time they would stop at these red lights, it would take forever for the semi to move. So she eventually just decided to pass him. And as she passes him, he starts waving and honking at her. First, she thought he was just waving and honking because he was annoyed that she passed him for whatever reason, even though it was a multiple lane highway. But after, kind of speeding up a little bit, he would catch up to her and he was motioning for her to pull over. And he had her convinced that there was something wrong with her car. She said he wasn't motioning like he was angry, he was motioning like he was concerned, and he kept motioning to like the back of my car, so I thought I had a flat tire. And before you come for her, she says she's never driven with a flat tire before, so she doesn't know what it feels like. And this area that she's in is mostly an industrial area. There's no gas stations around or anything, but there's a decent amount of traffic going by, and there's a large shoulder. So she feels it's safe to pull over. And as she's slowing down to pull over, she notices that the truck driver is also slowing down behind her. So she pulls over and he pulls in behind her. She feels like it's safe to get out with all of the cars driving by, so she gets out and she inspects all of the tires and realizes she doesn't have a flat. Meanwhile, this driver is still sitting in his truck, and as she's going to get back in her car, he steps out and he starts yelling at her, but she can't really hear what he's saying over the traffic. And he's like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "Why don't you tell me? Like, you were motioning for me to pull over. You were acting like there was something wrong with my car." And he goes, "Oh, come back here. There's a crack on your back bumper." She's like, "Okay." Well, she's like, "This is my grandmother's car. Like, she probably back into something she can't see well, He's like, "Well, why don't you come back to look at it? It looks dangerous." And she's like, "No, I'm good." And then I guess he notices the county where the car is registered on the plate, and he says, "Oh, you're from here?" And she says, "No, that's my grandmother's. My grandmother's from there." And he goes, "Oh, where are you headed?" And she goes, "Oxford." And he goes, "Do you go to school there?" And she says, "Yeah," even though she doesn't. She's just lying to him. She's like, "Yeah, actually, I'm late to meet some friends. Like, we have to go study. So thanks for the help. I gotta go." Like, "I really think you should come look at this crack in the bumper. It looks serious." She goes, "No, I'm good." And she starts to get back in her car. And as she does, he starts running at her. And she notices as he's running at her, he's got his hand in his jacket pocket. As she's getting back into the car, slams the car door, he pulls out his hand and he has some kind of cloth in his hand, reaching for her face as she slams the car door shut. And she said she just left. She just pulled out into traffic, almost caused an accident. And as she does, he's still banging on the window, banging on the door, standing on the shoulder, screaming at her. She calls her mom, freaking out. Her mom's like, "You need to call 911. So she does. Actually have her come in to make a statement. And when she does, they tell her that they've had a lot of cases in the area of girls getting into an unmarked semi, plain white, and then those girls going missing, never being seen or heard from again, all along Route 45. "Oh, if you're driving, be careful." She said his face still haunts me.
He calls the police asking why they haven't caught him yet. He says he stabbed someone with an ice pick and he's gonna keep killing. He can't stop himself. Every single state has had at least one serial killer, if not multiple. And today I'm going to tell you guys about one of the most notorious serial killers from Minnesota. Today I'm going to be telling you guys about Paul Michael Stephanie, and he was called the Weepy Voice Killer because of how pathetic he sounded when he would call the police confessing to his crimes crying. So this all kind of starts December 31st of 1980. The police get a call at 3 a.m. from a man. It sounds like he might be crying on the phone, and he tells them a location, and then he says, "There's a girl hurt here." And when the police arrive, there's no man anywhere, so they don't know if the caller was the person doing this or if it was a witness. They don't really know, but there's no one around except for a girl who had been brutally beaten. Her name was Karen Potak, and they found her in St. Paul, Minnesota. She had severe wounds and a brain injury. Again, it was clear she'd been beaten and absolutely brutalized. They investigate at the time, but seemingly they have little to no leads, and so unfortunately at the time they don't know who did this to her. The next year, in 1981, the police get a second call, and it sounds very similar, and the guy asks the police when they will find him, and he says,
I just stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing somebody. He's literally begging the police to catch him because he is just going to keep doing this over and over again. The police end up discovering that he was calling about a girl named Kimberly Compton. She was an 18-year-old student at the time, and he had killed her on June 3rd. 2 days after he killed her, he called the police again, crying, saying, "I'm so sorry for killing her." And he said he was going to turn himself in, but he unfortunately never did. At this point, the police still don't know who the killer is. And to my knowledge, they hadn't even connected Karen's assault to Kimberly's murder. I don't think they had connected those at this time. They're trying to figure this out, and on June 6th, so the day after he had called and said he'd turn himself in, he ends up calling the newspapers that were local that had reported on her death, and he says that they got some facts wrong. And then on June 11th, he calls the police again, sobbing, whimpering, and they could literally barely understand him in this call, but he essentially says he's sorry for what he did to Kimberly, which, like, no one cares that you're sorry. Turn yourself in. But unfortunately, still, they don't know who this is. He won't turn himself in. He just keeps calling. Then, in Minneapolis, he kills a 40-year-old woman named Barbara Simmons. She was a nurse, and he killed her after they met at a bar. A waitress has come forward as a witness and said that Barbara said to the waitress, "He's cute. I hope he's nice since he's giving me a ride home." And unfortunately, that waitress is likely the last person to see her alive before he killed her. Barbara was found stabbed the next day, and afterwards, the guy again called and said, "Please don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. And then he says Kimberly Compton was the first one over in St. Paul. This is when they start to put together that this is all done by the same guy and that they potentially have a serial killer on their hands. And so they're frantically trying to figure out who this is before more victims end up showing up, and they're getting more calls from him confessing to things that they can't solve. August 21st of 1982, a 19-year-old S-worker is picked up by a guy, and she immediately senses that something is wrong because she thought they were going to drive into the city. He starts driving into the suburbs, and she's like, "This is not what we had planned." And he pulls into a dead-end road, and then he starts stabbing her with a screwdriver. She's screaming and obviously trying to fight back, and she grabs a glass bottle and hits him over the head with it, and it like breaks and cuts his face, but he's still assaulting her. Fortunately, a man that lived nearby heard the screams and is incredible and runs over and sees what is happening, and instead of running away, he runs towards this man attacking and stabbing this woman. He pulls him off of her, and he is trying to like help her survive the situation. Paul ends up getting in the car and driving off, and he drives home. The guy ends up calling the ambulance, and fortunately, Denise does end up surviving. When Paul gets home after he flees the scene, he notices that he's bleeding from the glass bottle, and he goes to get medical help. And he also makes a call once again, and this is when they realize they connect him to this assault, and then they realize that he is the killer connected to all the other callings. So this is kind of what makes them realize that he is the weepy voice killer. He is the guy that killed the two other women and then called about it. So they end up being able to arrest him, and this goes to trial. And while in trial, Denise and the man that went to go help her identify Paul in trial. On top of that, his ex-wife and his sister both listen to the recordings of the calls to the police and identify him and say that is his voice as he's like crying on the phone. And then there's a bunch of other evidence in trial. I'm not going to get into all of it. He, in the end, was sentenced to 58 years, which doesn't seem like enough for killing two women, assaulting another, and then attempting to kill a third. That just doesn't seem nearly enough. But he ends up, after a while, getting diagnosed with skin cancer, and this is when he decides to actually confess to everything. He confesses to the known murders, and then he actually confesses to a murder that they hadn't even considered him for. He confessed to killing Kathleen Greening, who was found dead in her home just outside of St. Paul back in 1992. So now they know that he killed 3 women and attempted to kill 2 more. He ended up in 1998 dying of cancer. He can no longer hurt anyone else, but he was absolutely terrible. And it's really interesting and crazy. And I don't mean interesting as a good thing, but the fact that he felt like he should call and like confess, and he had enough guilt to confess, but not enough to like turn himself in. It's so weird that that's what he felt like doing. We see so often that serial killers are completely remorseless, and he kind of sounds like he had some remorse but couldn't stop himself. And there's a couple different shows and books and stuff that cover this and kind of dive into like potential psychology of that and stuff like that. And it's really interesting to kind of look at. But regardless of if he felt bad or not, he was a terrible, awful, disgusting human. And he took the lives of multiple people and altered the lives of many others.